Chapter 350. There was a cultivator in a dark green robe standing in front of the room that was flowing with colorful light. In the cultivator's hand was a magic treasure shaped like a bamboo tube. The door of the house was tightly closed, as if the owner did not welcome others to visit. Xiao Lingyu also followed Luo Zhe to the door, less than 10 feet away from the cultivator holding the bamboo tube. "Brother Xiao, what do you think?" Luo Zhe did not act rashly, but asked first through voice transmission. "I can't penetrate into the house with my mind, and I feel from the aura overflowing from this house that it doesn't seem to be a building, but a magic treasure," Xiao Lingyu replied through voice transmission. "Magic treasure? Could it be a divine artifact?" Luo Zhe said in surprise. "My feeling may not be accurate," Xiao Lingyu replied calmly, but his expression did not change in the slightest. Although he said so, Xiao Lingyu was already completely certain that this house was a divine artifact, and it was very likely to be a space-type divine artifact. To put it bluntly, it was a spiritual abode. Previously, Xiao Lingyu had not sensed any traces of the formation's fluctuations, but before arriving at this spiritual abode, he vaguely sensed some faint fluctuations of the formation. This spiritual abode should be the core of the formation, and the formation should also have the function of protecting this spiritual abode. However, the formation here has already been destroyed, or perhaps there isn't enough energy to support it and it has lost its function. Xiao Lingyu looked at the spiritual abode in front of him. Although his expression was very calm, he thought of many things. "We'll know what it is when we go in and take a look." After Luo Zhe finished his voice transmission, he quickly walked to the door of the house, wrapped his palm with his power, and pushed towards the door. However, just as Luo Zhe's palm touched the door of the spiritual abode, a circle of colorful light suddenly swept past, and with an incomparably powerful aura, it pushed all three of them away. Everyone was pushed to the foot of the mountain again before they could stabilize their bodies. The colorful light and the impact of the aura did not hurt anyone, but the repulsive force contained in it was impossible for anyone to resist. Not only the three people who had been standing at the entrance of the divine abode, but even the cultivators of the Heavenly Tao sect and the Fire sect who had been searching for treasures in the various stone houses were all pushed to the foot of the mountain. It was clear that the rainbow light and aura came from the divine palace. It was likely that a cultivator from the Heavenly Tao sect had touched the divine palace. It was also because of the colorful light and aura at the beginning that the Heavenly Tao sect cultivator with the bamboo tube-shaped magic treasure only stood at the entrance of the divine residence and did not act rashly. Soon, the disciples of the Heavenly Tao sect and the Fire sect once again rushed to the top of the mountain. Xiao Lingyu and Luo Zhe also returned to the entrance of the divine dwellings. This time, Luo Zhe didn't touch the door of the divine mansion. He waited until the other cultivators had finished plundering all the treasures in the houses on the mountain peak. All the disciples of the two sects had gathered in front of the divine mansion. No one could do anything about it. "How's your harvest?" Luo Zhe asked the white-haired old man via voice transmission. "Not bad. We got more than a dozen supreme-grade treasures and 2 quasi-divine weapons," the white-haired old man replied with a smile. The supreme-grade treasures were nothing more than some supreme-grade immortal weapons, immortal pills, or materials for refining supreme-grade immortal weapons and immortal pills. These were nothing to the experts of the big sections. They were only a little attractive to the disciples of the big sects, who were below the 9 heavens Xian immortal realm. The quasi-divine weapons were different. They were not as good as divine weapons, but their power was far beyond supreme-grade immortal weapons. Even the experts of the immortal emperor realm would covet them. The reason why the major powers of the immortal and devil realms sent so many elite disciples here was not for the disciples to obtain great opportunities, nor was it for immortal stones or devil stones. It was for the elite disciples to search for quasi-divine tools or divine tools here. "There may be another divine weapon here," Luo Zhe said to the white-haired old man via voice transmission. "What? A divine weapon?" the white-haired old man couldn't help but exclaim. His words were heard clearly by everyone. The cultivators of the Tiandao sect were also guessing that even if this house was not a divine weapon, there must be a divine weapon inside. When they heard the white-haired old man's exclamation, they were even more certain of their guess, and all of them showed a fanatical look. Luoja glared at the white-haired old man, but he didn't care too much. Even if everyone knew that there was a divine weapon here, they had to have the ability to take it away. The cultivator of the Tiandao sect holding the bamboo tube magic treasure waited for a while, then suddenly threw the bamboo tube in his hand into the air. Then, he poured his power into the bamboo tube with the other cultivators of the Tiandao sect. The cultivators of the fire sect were already very familiar with this scene, so they immediately retreated a distance. Boom! A colorful ball of light flew out of the bamboo tube and fiercely hit the door of the divine mansion. The divine mansion trembled slightly, and a colorful light shone again, and a powerful aura swept out again. The cultivators of the two sects on the top of the mountain were pushed down the mountain again, and then flew back to the top of the mountain at the same time. In terms of speed, Xiaolingyu had an absolute advantage, but he didn't fly too fast. Instead, he arrived at the door of the divine mansion first with Luozhi. The bamboo tube magic treasure was still hovering in the air, but the door of the divine mansion had already been blasted open. The cultivators of the Tiandao sect rushed over and put away the bamboo tube magic treasure. Although the door of the divine mansion had been opened, after everyone arrived, no one dared to rush into the divine mansion at the first moment. They all looked at the door with uncertain expressions, not daring to act rashly. However, there was still a colorful light flowing around the divine mansion, and everyone's consciousness couldn't penetrate it. Looking at it with the naked eye, the situation behind the door of the divine mansion was blurry. After waiting for a while, everyone was surprised to find that the door of the divine mansion was gradually closing. Therefore, the impatient and bold people couldn't wait any longer and immediately rushed into the divine mansion. Luozhi hesitated for a moment, then rushed in as well. In a breath's time, only Xiaolingyu was left outside the door of the divine mansion. Even those who were timid didn't want to fall behind when they saw so many people entering. Although the divine artifact is good, it's definitely not something that anyone can take away easily. These people are too impatient. Looking at the closed door of the divine mansion, Xiaolingyu shook his head and smiled bitterly. He felt that this divine mansion must be extremely dangerous, so he didn't go in. He didn't like this kind of unpredictable thing the most. Luozhi and the other people of the fire sect were willing to go in, but Xiaolingyu wouldn't rush in to protect their safety. Peace returned to the top of the mountain, but Xiaolingyu didn't leave. He waited quietly at the door of the divine mansion. 3 days later, the originally quiet divine mansion suddenly began to flash with colorful light, and a powerful aura surged out one after another. Xiaolingyu was pushed to the foot of the mountain. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't rush to the top of the mountain against the aura. He could only wait at the foot of the mountain on high alert. After waiting for less than a day, the colorful light flashing from the top of the mountain, as well as the aura that was constantly fluctuating, all disappeared. Xiaolingyu flew up again, but was surprised to find that the divine mansion had disappeared without a trace. At the original location of the divine mansion, there were more than 50 cultivators standing. Among them, there were only 3 cultivators from the fire sect, and the rest were all from the Tiandao sect. These 50 people were all a little embarrassed, while the 3 people from the fire sect were all in tatters and covered in wounds. They were all staring at the people from the Tiandao sect with incomparable anger. The cultivators from the Tiandao sect surrounded the 3 people from the fire sect, and their killing intent was also strong. "What's going on?" Xiaolingyu frowned slightly. He was very surprised and slowly flew over. "Tiandao sect, you've gone too far." The old man, whose white hair was already dyed red with blood, roared angrily. "Haha, it's because you're not strong enough. Yet you still insist on fighting with us for the divine artifact. Should we just watch you take the divine artifact and not do anything? The cultivator holding the bamboo tube replied with a smile. Just now, the treasure was already taken by you, and we didn't do anything. Why are you still attacking us? The old man questioned. In order to protect the divine artifact, you all risked your lives. The treasure was taken by us, and there were only 7 or 8 of you left. Naturally, you didn't dare to do anything. But after all, you killed so many of our people. We have to avenge our fellow disciples, right? The cultivator holding the bamboo tube explained calmly. What about now? Now that the divine artifact is in your hands, and only 3 of our people are left, why are you still surrounding us? Luoja asked coldly. The other party had more than 10 times the number of people on their side, and they also had a divine artifact. No matter how powerful Luoja was, he couldn't win against so many wolves. We're surrounding you, of course, because we want your lives. Can't you even understand this? The cultivator holding the bamboo tube replied. You're so ruthless. Don't you care at all about the alliance between our fire sect and your Tiandao sect? The white-haired old man asked hatefully. It's precisely because we care that we want to kill all of you. Otherwise, when you go back and spread rumors, it will definitely affect the alliance between the 2 sections. The cultivator holding the bamboo tube shook his head and responded. Then, he suddenly shouted, Do it! After receiving the order, the dozens of Tiandao sect cultivators launched all the attacks they had prepared. Dozens of streams of light shot towards the 3 people from the fire sect. Even though Luoja had the advantage of speed, under such a dense attack, it was difficult for him to use his movement technique. With dozens of cultivators attacking at the same time, the 3 injured cultivators from the fire sect probably wouldn't even be able to withstand this round of attacks. However, just as the Tiandao sect cultivators launched their attacks, Xiaolingyu had already landed in front of the 3 cultivators from the fire sect. She released her aura and instantly sent the dozens of streams of light flying. The immortal treasure retreated, and its brilliance dimmed. However, the immortal talisman flew back and exploded among the Tiandao sect cultivators. The Tiandao sect cultivators never expected that this wave of attack, which seemed to be able to kill all 3 cultivators from the fire sect, would actually cause more than 10 deaths on their side in the end. Who are you? The cultivator holding the bamboo tube stared at Xiaolingyu and asked. Chapter 351. The expression of the cultivator holding the bamboo tube changed as he asked, You don't seem to be from the fire sect, do you? No. Xiaolingyu nodded and replied. Since you're not from the fire sect, I advise you not to stick your neck out. Our Tiandao sect is not something you can afford to provoke, the cultivator holding the bamboo tube said coldly. I have no intention of provoking you. I just want to save the lives of these 3 people. Xiaolingyu shook his head. Sir, you are only one person. You must be below the 9 heavens Xian, immortal realm. I believe that you are acting rashly right now. The cultivator with the bamboo tube said in a threatening tone. Sir, you are not a rational person. Haha, I know very well whether I'm rational or not. Actually, I also want to advise you to take your people and leave quickly. After all, the divine artifact is already in your hands. It's better not to complicate matters. Xiaolingyu said with a smile. Although he was facing dozens of cultivators from the Tiandao sect, his expression was very relaxed. In fact, Xiaolingyu knew that the people from the Tiandao sect would definitely not leave easily. I think you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I'd like to see how you're going to save the lives of these 3 people. The cultivator holding the bamboo tube seemed to have lost his patience and directly threw the bamboo tube in his hand into the air. Then, the cultivators of the Tiandao sect behind him very tacitly poured their power into the bamboo tube at the same time. After all, the bamboo tube was a divine artifact. Xiaolingyu did not dare to take it head-on. Just as the bamboo tube was accumulating power, He had already jumped into the air and grabbed the bamboo tube in his hand. The expressions of the cultivators of the Tiandao sect changed drastically. Their power pouring into the divine artifact had been forcibly interrupted, and they all subconsciously attacked Xiaolingyu. Unfortunately, their attacks still could not penetrate the aura fluctuations released by Xiaolingyu. After all, a divine artifact was a divine artifact. Although Xiaolingyu had grabbed it, he could not move it. After the bamboo tube was grabbed, it began to tremble violently, and its entire body shone with colorful light. With a thought, Xiaolingyu's silver moon broken blade appeared in his hand. He shouted and slashed at the bamboo tube with the silver moon broken blade. With a clang, the seemingly fragile bamboo tube actually blocked the silver moon broken blade's attack. However, at the place where the silver moon broken blade had struck the bamboo tube, tiny cracks had already appeared. Xiaolingyu calmed down slightly. Withstanding the attacks of the Heavenly Tao sect cultivators, he slashed down again. With a crack, the bamboo tube shattered in Xiaolingyu's hand. Since he couldn't control it, he could only destroy it. If he let it go, the Heavenly Tao sect cultivators would definitely use it to attack him. The cultivators of the Heavenly Tao sect were all dumbfounded. They never thought that the other party would be able to destroy a divine artifact. The only thing that could destroy a divine artifact was a divine artifact of a higher grade. Not only was the other party ridiculously powerful, but he also had a divine artifact. No wonder he was so arrogant just now. Go! The leader of the Heavenly Tao sect already understood the difference between the two sides. After reminding them, he turned around and flew away. Too late. Since Xiaolingyu had already attacked and destroyed the other party's divine artifact, he had no intention of letting anyone from the Heavenly Tao sect escape. The wings of extreme speed appeared on Xiaolingyu's back. Then, he turned into a ray of silver light and flashed in all directions. Everywhere he passed, the Heavenly Tao sect cultivators exploded into a mist of blood. In just a few breaths of time, only 2 of the dozens of Heavenly Tao sect cultivators were left. If Xiaolingyu used his full strength, his speed was comparable to an early-stage monarch realm cultivator. These cultivators below the 9 heavens Xian immortal realm could only dream of escaping in front of him. In the end, the 2 of them had already escaped far away. Xiaolingyu chased after the cultivator with the bamboo tube. He felt that this person should be the leader of this group of Heavenly Tao sect disciples, so he had to kill this person first. However, after that person fled for a distance, his entire body was wrapped in a dazzling silver light. Then, as if he had teleported, he moved a long distance in a flash. His speed was actually not inferior to an early-stage Demon Lord realm cultivator. Even with such speed, he could not escape from Xiaolingyu's pursuit. As for the other person, Xiaolingyu had already seen Luo Zhe and the other 2 chasing after him. After 10 minutes, the silver light on that person's body suddenly disappeared. His speed also abruptly returned to its original level. Naturally, Xiaolingyu quickly caught up with him. A chaotic demon seal hit him. Like the other Heavenly Tao sect cultivators, that person's body exploded into a mist of blood. The mist of blood was then blown away by the wind. A palm-sized Dharma treasure that was shaped like a small house gradually appeared. This small house was the spiritual abode. I knew it was on you. Xiaolingyu flew over and held the spiritual abode with his hand to observe it carefully. At this time, the spiritual abode was ownerless and very quiet. However, Xiaolingyu could only see it with his eyes. He could not penetrate it with his consciousness. Since that guy can recognize a master, I can definitely do it too. Then, Xiaolingyu dripped a drop of blood essence that contained a wisp of his soul into the spiritual abode. As expected, the blood essence was absorbed by the spiritual abode. Xiaolingyu immediately formed a mental connection with the spiritual abode. However, Xiaolingyu had not undergone any sacrificial refinement. Like the Heavenly Tao sect cultivators, He could not use this spiritual abode to display its power. He could only familiarize himself with it for a while before keeping it in his body. Then, Xiaolingyu sent a message to Luozhi. After receiving a reply, he aimed in a direction and flew at full speed. After about 100 breaths, Xiaolingyu caught up with Luozhi and the other two. That guy escaped, Luozhi said gloomily. Xiaolingyu frowned but did not complain. Instead, he said, he shouldn't have escaped too far. Let's look around nearby. In the following period of time, Xiaolingyu, Luozhi, and the other two continued to search the sea. The range of their search was constantly expanding. Unfortunately, they could not find the remaining Heavenly Tao sect cultivator. I think we should wait near the exit. No matter where he hides, he has to go through the exit to return to the immortal world. After searching for a full year, Luozhi suggested to Xiaolingyu. If they could not find him after a year, it would probably be useless to continue searching. Xiaolingyu pondered for a moment and nodded. On the way to the exit, Xiaolingyu and the other three were often intercepted. The other party was targeting Luozhi. If Luozhi and the other two could deal with it themselves, the three of them would deal with it themselves. If the other party was too many and could not deal with them, Xiaolingyu would help them deal with it. Luozhi and the other two had seen Xiaolingyu's strength, so even if they knew that the divine abode was definitely with Xiaolingyu, they did not dare to ask. Besides, Luozhi and the other two were too embarrassed to ask. After all, without Xiaolingyu's help, they would have died long ago. How could they ask about the divine abode? Since they did not ask, Xiaolingyu naturally would not explain anything. He did not feel guilty about taking the divine abode. The fire sect had suffered heavy losses this time, so Luozhi and the other two were naturally not in the mood to take the risk to seek fate. However, Xiaolingyu had intentionally or unintentionally collected many benefits for them along the way. The fire sect had suffered such a great loss this time. After returning, the elders of the fire sect would definitely hold Luozhi and the white-haired old man accountable. Xiaolingyu felt that Luozhi was a good person, so he wanted Luozhi to have more confidence when he returned. This confidence naturally came from the gains. After nearly 200 years, Xiaolingyu and the other three finally reached the exit and stopped in front of a spatial passage that led to the celestial realm. According to the previous agreement, the four of them did not go to the celestial realm. Instead, they waited beside this spatial passage, waiting for the cultivator from the Tiandao sect to come to them. However, this independent space would appear for nearly 10,000 years every time. Generally speaking, everyone would only start their return journey in the last 2,000 years. At present, this independent space had just opened, so Xiaolingyu had to wait for several thousand years. This made Xiaolingyu, who was eager to go to the celestial realm, a little hesitant. After waiting for a few months and not seeing a single person, the white-haired old man suddenly said, "If we keep waiting here, when everyone starts their return journey, many people will come to seek revenge on me. Although we are not afraid, it will be very troublesome. Brother Xiao will also offend more forces because of this." Xiaolingyu was already a little hesitant. After hearing the white-haired old man's words, he only pondered for a moment and said, "No need to wait, let's go to the celestial realm." The Tiandao sect was heartless first. Even if that guy goes back and says something, the Tiandao sect might not have the nerve to take revenge. Moreover, that person doesn't know Brother Zhao's background. No matter how powerful the Tiandao sect is, it won't be easy to find Brother Xiao in the vast celestial realm, Luozhi added. Xiaolingyu believed that the experts from the Tiandao sect would not know what happened in this independent space in a short period of time. After they found out, not only would he carefully avoid them, but he would also refine the spiritual abode. With the help of the spiritual abode, even if he was unlucky enough to be hunted down by the experts from the Tiandao sect, as long as the other party did not send celestial venerables with divine artifacts, he would be able to protect himself. The spatial passageway leading to the immortal world was also filled with spatial turbulence. However, the spatial energy that was as sharp as knives and swords could not harm them. Xiaolingyu's wings of extreme speed could absorb the spatial energy in the vicinity. After exiting this passage, Xiaolingyu could be considered to have truly arrived at the celestial realm. However, before he could see the scenery of the celestial realm, he first saw two experts from the celestial realm. When the two experts from the celestial realm saw the four of them, they were very surprised because they did not expect anyone to come out so early. Fire Sect's Luo Zhe greets the two seniors. Luo Zhe immediately greeted them respectfully, wanting to help Xiaolingyu distract the two experts from the celestial realm. Xiaolingyu's expression was normal because he found that the two of them were only at the immortal monarch realm and could not see through his secrets. Chapter 352. So it's a junior from the Fire Sect. Why are you out now? Didn't a few dozen people from your Fire Sect go in? Where are the others? The two immortal monarchs were a little surprised and curious. Their eyes naturally swept over Xiaolingyu and the other three. When they saw Xiaolingyu, the two immortal monarchs frowned at the same time. There were some accidents inside. Our other fellow disciples all died inside. The four of us were lucky enough to escape, Luo Zhe said with a sad expression. Life and death are predestined. These independent spaces have been here for countless years. Every time they appear, they will take away many good people from the immortal world. One of the immortal monarchs said with sympathy. Is he also from your Fire Sect? The other immortal monarch pointed at Xiaolingyu and asked. Yes. Luo Zhe nodded. Your Fire Sect has quite a few talents. The immortal monarch seemed to be implying something. Senior, you flatter me. Luo Zhe said politely. Since you're out, go back. Don't let the elders of the sect wait. One of the immortal monarchs waved his hand and said. Then we'll take our leave. Luo Zhe bowed again, then quickly left with Xiaolingyu and the other two. After Xiaolingyu and the other three left, one of the immortal monarchs narrowed his eyes and said, I can't see through that kid. The other immortal monarch also nodded and said, I can't see through him either. He probably has a magic treasure to hide his strength. The immortal monarch who spoke first continued, This time, only 4 independent spaces have appeared. All parties feel that these 4 independent spaces must have great opportunities. They have invested a lot in the elite disciples who entered the independent spaces. It is said that the Heavenly Tao sect has even taken out a divine weapon. The other immortal monarch smiled and said, So what if they have a divine weapon? Those who enter are all juniors below the 9 heavens Xian immortal realm. They can't unleash the power of the divine weapon at all. Even if they encounter a great opportunity, it will be very difficult to grasp it. After successfully passing the test, Xiaolingyu felt a little more relaxed. He didn't use any magic treasure to hide his background, but the chaos demonic power itself was very special. Ordinary cultivators were not familiar with the aura of the chaos demonic power, so they naturally couldn't distinguish it. This is the demon-subduing continent. Right now, there are many immortal lords and even immortal sovereigns here. Brother Xiao should leave as soon as possible. After flying for a while, Luo Zhe reminded Xiaolingyu. The other 2 cultivators from the Fire Sect had seen Xiaolingyu in action several times. Although Xiaolingyu and Luo Zhe did not say anything, the 2 cultivators from the Fire Sect could vaguely guess that Xiaolingyu was from the Devil World. When Xiaolingyu fought with others and released her power, it was difficult to completely suppress her demonic nature. Then let's part here. Thank you for leading the way, Brother Luo, Xiaolingyu said politely. We should be the ones thanking him, the white-haired old man said with a smile. Brother Xiao, if you need our Fire Sect's help in the future, please don't hesitate. You can come to the Fire Source continent to look for us. Luo Zhe did not forget to remind Xiao Chen. Of course. Xiaolingyu nodded. The teleportation array is over there. With Brother Zhao's speed, you should be able to see it within 2 hours. Luo Zhi said as he pointed to the left. Let's go. Xiao Lingyu responded again, and flew away at top speed. Junior brother Luo, do you think the divine abode is with him? The white-haired old man asked after Xiao Lingyu disappeared into the sky. Why? Is senior brother Zhang still thinking about the divine abode? Luo Zhi said in a displeased tone. We sacrifice so many people, but in the end, senior brother Zhang, junior brother Han, the three of us have to remember one thing. We can't be sure who the divine abode will fall into in the end. We will try our best not to say anything about brother Xiao. Even if we want to say something, we will say as little as possible. No matter what his background is, at least our lives were saved by him. After Luo Zhi said this, he continued to fly forward. At this time, the surroundings of the demon-subduing continent's teleportation array were not very lively. Those who should have come had already come, and those who should have left had already left. If there were no special circumstances, cultivators would not come to a special continent like the demon-subduing continent, just like how the cultivators of the demon realm would not go to the immortal execution continent. After waiting for less than a cup of tea's time, Xiao Lingyu successfully entered the teleportation array. First, he put in a few immortal stones, then casually tapped on the astrolabe, and the teleportation array exploded with a rumbling sound. After a flash of white light, Xiao Lingyu's body suddenly disappeared. The space of the immortal world and the space of the devil world were almost the same. Whether it was the space pressure or the space fluctuation rules, they should be about the same. The only difference was that the space of the immortal world was filled with immortal spiritual energy, while the space of the devil world was filled with devil spiritual energy. There were no immortal stone veins in the devil world, and no devil stone veins in the immortal world. The cultivators of the immortal realm were not fond of fighting, so the closer they were to the spatial barrier between the immortal realm and the demon realm, the fewer cultivators there were on the nearby immortal realm. Every time the immortal realm and the demon realm fought, the immortal realm would need to mobilize everyone in order to have a large number of experts to participate in the battle. However, the demon realm did not need any mobilization at all, and countless experts would rush over to fight. Right now, an independent space had already appeared in the spatial barrier between the two realms, and the spatial crack that connected the two realms was about to appear within 1,000,000 years. The immortal realm was still as calm as ever. After teleporting a few times in a row, Xiao Lingyu did not see any signs of nervousness on the cultivators of the immortal realm, nor did he see a large army of immortal realm experts. He continued to teleport until he was far away from the demon-subduing continent and the spatial barrier between the two realms. Only then did Xiao Lingyu stop on a continent called Zhouwan. The Zhouwan continent was extremely large. Although the entire continent was almost a desert filled with yellow sand, it was still one of the few famous continents in the west of the immortal realm. The reason why it was famous was not because it was rich in resources, nor was it because of any powerful characters that had appeared here, but because there was a spectacle here. Looking down from the sky, one could often see countless round stones rolling rapidly in the wilderness. It was a spectacular sight. Xiao Lingyu stopped not because he wanted to see anything strange, but because there was a branch of the Immortal Realm mercenary organization in Zhouwan City, and it was a relatively high-grade branch. Although the ordinary mercenary branch on the Immortal Realm continent could accept missions, they could not accept Xiao Lingyu's mission. Xiao Lingyu wanted to find someone, but he could not confirm the approximate location of the person he was looking for. He needed the mercenary to search within the largest area, and this kind of mission could only be issued by a high-grade branch. Perhaps there were too many cultivators who came to sightsee, so Zhouwan City was very lively and even a little crowded. Xiao Lingyu's pace could not be fast. However, after all, he had just arrived in the Immortal Realm not long ago and was not familiar with the Immortal Realm, so he was not too anxious about everything. While passing by pedestrians, he observed the shops and buildings on both sides of the street. The buildings in the big cities in the Devil Realm were very simple, almost all of them were piled up with stones. However, the cultivators in the Immortal Realm preferred to enjoy themselves and had higher standards, so the buildings in the big cities in the Immortal Realm were more gorgeous and novel, and at the same time, they did not lose their grandeur. There were magic treasure shops shining with multicolored light and full of noble aura, horizontal plaques made of glazed crystal stones, and tall buildings built with high-grade wood that emitted a fragrance. Immortals considered a lot of things when they did things, while most of the cultivators of the Devil Path were very straightforward and direct. There were two distinct cultivation systems and two completely different attitudes toward life and cultivation. Everyone was walking on the same road, so it was inevitable that there would be friction. Xiao Lingyu had just walked 2 streets when he bumped into someone because he had been looking at both sides of the street. After bumping into someone, Xiao Lingyu's expression immediately sank, and he took 2 steps back as if it was a conditioned reflex. However, the person who was bumped into just smiled and said, "It's okay," and then left. Xiao Lingyu let out a long sigh, secretly saying that he was too nervous. However, if this matter happened in the Devil Realm, the person who was bumped into would definitely not let it go. At the very least, he would curse at him. If it weren't for the prohibition of fighting in the big cities of the Devil Realm, there might be a bloody battle because of this. The mercenary army was indeed a big force in the Immortal Realm. Just like the bounty hunter organization in the Devil Realm, their branches were built in the center of each big city. Moreover, the buildings were tall and gave people a very obvious sense of oppression. The first floor of the mercenary army branch in the Zhou continent was very spacious. The walls on both sides were also covered with a huge screen, and missions gradually appeared. Most of the cultivators were staring at those missions. Unlike the bounty hunter organization, non-members of the mercenary army could also accept the missions issued by the mercenary army. After completing the missions, the reward was the same as the mercenary army's reward. Moreover, the mercenary army's organization was not very strong. Ordinary cultivators could also form a mercenary army by themselves. According to the overall strength and the number and difficulty of completing missions, the mercenary army's level could be continuously upgraded. The members of the mercenary army were ranked according to their level, and each individual mercenary group also had a high and low level. Xiao Lingyu was not very interested in this, and he had learned a lot from Luozhi before. He just glanced around slightly and then looked at the counter. Just as he was about to line up, a cultivator suddenly stopped him and said to him, "Fellow Taoist, are you interested in joining our Sky Dome mercenary army?" "Our Sky Dome? Sorry, I don't have that intention." Xiao Lingyu didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking and directly bypassed him. Just as he bypassed that cultivator, he was stopped by another cultivator who also asked him if he wanted to join the mercenary army. Xiao Lingyu tried his best to politely reject the 8 cultivators' invitation before walking to the counter and joining the line. After waiting for an hour, Xiao Lingyu came to the counter. A delicate and pretty fairy asked in a sweet voice, "Fellow Taoist, what mission are you here to accept?" "Haha, I'm not here to accept a mission. I'm here to issue a mission," Xiao Lingyu said with a smile. "Fellow Taoist, what mission do you want to issue?" the fairy asked. "I want to find a person in the entire Immortal Realm. This person is a female cultivator who should have just ascended to the Immortal Realm not long ago," Xiao Lingyu answered. This mission. Chapter 353. Xiao Lingyu went to the second floor with the token given to him by the fairy and entered a room. The room wasn't big and the decorations were very simple. There was only a middle-aged cultivator sitting behind a wooden table. At this moment, the middle-aged cultivator looked at Xiao Lingyu and then pointed to a wooden chair in front of the table. He smiled and said, "Please sit." Xiao Lingyu sat down calmly and then repeated the mission he wanted to post. This kind of mission not only involves a lot of people, but it also takes a long time. Generally speaking, we don't accept this kind of mission because it takes a lot of effort just to help you post this mission to the various continents. The middle-aged cultivator frowned and continued, however, the person you're looking for is just a cultivator who has just ascended. It's not very difficult to find him. As long as you can take out enough immortal stones, this mission can still be posted. How many immortal stones do I need? Xiaoling Yu asked without changing his expression. 5 million immortal crystals. The middle-aged cultivator pondered for a moment as if he had quickly calculated and said. Xiaoling Yu's sword-like eyebrows squeezed together when he heard this. If it was 5 million demonic crystals, he could take it out now, but he really couldn't take out 5 million immortal crystals. Xiaoling Yu originally didn't have any immortal stones on him, but in that independent space, he killed dozens of Heavenly Dao sect disciples and collected a lot of immortal stones from their storage magic treasures. However, the total number of immortal stones was still far from 5 million immortal crystals, and a part of it was even returned to Luozhi. This is already the lowest price. If you don't have that many immortal crystals on you now, you can wait until you have enough before posting the mission. In any case, you won't be able to complete this mission in a short time. The middle-aged cultivator saw Xiaoling Yu's difficult expression and knew that he didn't have enough immortal stones, so he said this. Sorry to disturb you. Xiaoling Yu stood up apologetically and left the mercenary building with a gloomy expression. I didn't expect that when I first ascended to the demon world, I was in a hurry to earn immortal stones to buy materials. Now that I've just arrived in the immortal world, I have to earn immortal stones first. At the entrance of the mercenary division, Xiaoling Yu couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Xiaoling Yu had a few million demonic crystals, but he needed demonic crystals for his cultivation, and demonic crystals were worthless in the immortal realm. He couldn't exchange them for immortal crystals, so he had to think of another way. There were many good things in his storage Dharma treasure, but they were either useful to him or useless to immortals. Even if he sold them, he wouldn't be able to get many immortal stones. Whether it was in the cultivation world or the demonic world, Xiaoling Yu's wealth had grown rapidly. He believed that it would be the same in the immortal world. Amongst all the methods to earn immortal stones, robbing others was the fastest, or taking out high-quality goods to auction. After pondering for a while, Xiaoling Yu suddenly turned around and entered the mercenary building. She glanced at the screens on both sides of the wall. If he wanted to rob, he could only rob the powerful cultivators because they would have a large amount of immortal crystals. Xiaoling Yu, who had just arrived in the immortal realm, didn't want to incur the wrath of the immortal realm's experts. As for high-quality goods, Xiaoling Yu felt that it was better to keep them for his own use. After thinking about it, Xiaoling Yu decided to earn immortal crystals by doing missions. 5 million immortal crystals wasn't a small amount. Ordinary missions didn't have high rewards, but missions with high rewards were naturally more difficult and dangerous. After looking for a long time, he once again went to the counter and waited in line. Another hour passed, and Xiaoling Yu arrived in front of the counter. Without waiting for the pretty girl to ask, he spoke first. I'm here to accept a mission. It's the mission to collect 10 sand crystals. Although the pretty girl recognized Xiaoling Yu, she didn't ask much. Instead, she said, the mission's deposit is 5,000 immortal crystals. Although the missions issued by the mercenary group were open to anyone, they had to pay a deposit. This deposit was actually a handling fee. Regardless of whether you completed the mission or not, this deposit would not be refunded. However, if you completed the mission, the mercenary group would give you the full reward and no other fees would be charged. It was said that in the past there was no deposit. When the cultivator completed the mission and came to receive the reward, the mercenary group would deduct the handling fee from the reward. However, later on, many cultivators directly found the person who issued the mission after completing the mission and received the reward in private. The person who issued the mission later came to the mercenary group branch to cancel the mission. This saved the handling fee for the mercenary group. Later on, the mercenary group set the rule that one had to pay a deposit before accepting a mission. Originally, the cultivator who accepted the mission couldn't get in touch with the cultivator who issued the mission. However, some missions required the cultivator who issued the mission to contact the person who issued the mission. The mercenary group couldn't hide the information of the cultivator who issued the mission to ensure that every cultivator who completed the mission would pay the relevant fees. After paying 5,000 immortal crystals, Xiaolingyu received a jade token and left the mercenary group's building. First, Xiaolingyu purchased a jade slip with a map of the Zoawaru continent engraved on it from a shop in the city. Then, he left Zoawaru City. Xiaolingyu had already read the contents of the jade slip and knew where he should go. After identifying the direction at the city gate, he jumped up and flew toward the northeast of Zoawaru City. After leaving Zoawaru City, Xiaolingyu gradually increased his speed. After flying at full speed for 3 days, he stopped at the edge of a desert with countless sand dunes. This desert was very famous on the Zoawaru continent. It was called the Sand Eagle Dunes because there were many sand eagles in it. All the sand eagles whose cultivation reached the mystic demon realm had sand crystals in their head. Sand crystals were a kind of high-quality material that contained soul power. Xiaolingyu came here to hunt sand eagles. Once he obtained 10 sand crystals, he would be considered to have completed the mission. Then, he could go to the mercenary group's branch to receive a reward of 200,000 immortal crystals. However, the sand eagles were bird-type demonic beasts. Their speed was extremely fast and far surpassed human cultivators of the same stage. The speed of an early-stage mystic demon realm sand eagle was comparable to that of a late-stage mystic demon realm human cultivator. Generally speaking, it was very difficult for cultivators whose cultivation had not reached the immortal monarch realm to hunt sand eagles of the mystic demon realm. They could not catch up to them at all. How could they hunt sand eagles? Moreover, the sand eagles most likely did not move alone. Most of the time, they were in groups. If one's cultivation had not reached the immortal monarch realm and arrived at the sand eagle dunes, they would probably become the sand eagle's food before they could even kill a single sand eagle. If they encountered a group of sand eagles, even an immortal monarch realm expert could only choose to retreat. It was also because hunting sand eagles was more difficult and dangerous. Moreover, sand crystals were high-grade soul materials that the reward for this mission was very high. After stopping outside the sand eagle dunes for a while, Xiaolingyu waited for her condition to be at its peak before flying into the depths of the sand eagle dunes. The sand eagle dunes covered a vast area. There were countless sand dunes that were not very tall. Looking down from midair, those sand dunes looked like layers upon layers of waves. Countless sand eagles whose cultivation had not reached the mystic demon realm were flapping their wings and flying between the sand dunes. They were either chasing and playing around, not realizing that they were being hunted. Sand eagles with weak cultivation did not have sand crystals in their heads. Therefore, no one would hunt them. The experts of the Weiwan continent even ordered the restriction cultivators to kill the weak sand eagles. Ordinary sand eagles had earthy yellow feathers. Their appearance was not much different from ordinary large eagles. They had sharp claws, iron hook-like beaks, and very sharp eyes. If they were not moving, it would be very difficult for cultivators to discover their existence just by looking at them with their naked eyes without carefully scanning with their immortal senses. The higher the cultivation of the sand eagle, the better it would be to hide among the sand dunes. In this desert, there was a type of sand mouse demon that was the prey of the sand eagles. Sand mouse demons, like other demonic beasts of the mouse clan, had an astonishing reproduction rate. Moreover, most of them hid in underground nests and only came out at night. Like the sand mouse demons, the sand eagles also lazily crouched among the sand dunes during the day to sleep or play around. At night, they would flap their wings and hover in the air. When they discovered a sand mouse demon, they would shoot down like a sharp arrow. Mystical demon realm desert eagles were also active at night and only hunted gerbil demons with similar cultivation bases. Although the desert eagles had a natural advantage, they still had to go through some trouble to deal with gerbil demons with similar cultivation bases. Experienced falconers would set out at night. Usually, they would hunt the gerbil demon first, and then use the gerbil demon as bait to lure the desert eagles. This experience was not a secret. There was a relevant introduction in the map Jade Slip. After Xiaolingyu entered the depths of the Sand Eagle Hill, he concealed his aura and hid in a cave, quietly waiting for the arrival of night. 8 hours later, the sky was completely dark. The rustling sounds of the sand mouse demons that left the cave and came to the surface were not very obvious in the whistling wind of the Sand Eagle Hill. As for the sand eagles, who were quietly gliding and hovering in the air, and staring at the ground with sharp eyes, they hardly made the slightest sound. The gerbil demons had very good hearing. They could clearly distinguish all kinds of movements when the wind was raging. Whenever a desert eagle pounced on them, they could sense the danger through the sound of friction between the desert eagle and the air. This was an important method for the gerbil demons to avoid being killed by the desert eagle. Xiaolingyu's hearing was not as good as the sand mice's, and his eyesight was not as good as the sand eagle's. However, he spread out his mind to cover a large area around him. Whether it was the sand eagles in the air or the sand mice on the ground, he could see them clearly. Xiaolingyu naturally did not care about ordinary sand mice and sand eagles. Even if a sand mouse passed by him or a sand eagle flew over his head, he did not move at all. After waiting for an entire night, not a single mystic demon realm sand mouse or sand eagle entered the range of his mind. Chapter 354. Night once again shrouded the entire Rouen continent, but the darkness couldn't make the continent quiet. Sand eagles constantly swooped down from the sky from all over the Sand Eagle Hill. They either missed or caught a gerbil and flew up again. After waiting for nearly 10 days, a middle-stage mystic demon realm gerbil finally entered the range of Xiaolingyu's consciousness. Xiaolingyu was not in a hurry to take action. Through these days of observation, he found that these gerbils were either too timid or too cautious. As long as they heard the slightest strange movement or felt the presence of danger, they would dive into the sand. Xiaolingyu did not know. The speed of the gerbils in the sand was much faster than on flat ground. If a middle-stage or late-stage mystic demon realm gerbil were to move at full speed in the sand, Xiaolingyu would have a hard time capturing them. This middle-stage mystic demon realm gerbil wasn't very big and was about the same size as an ordinary wild wolf. However, it had a pair of fist-sized yellow eyes and 2 furry ears. It crawled on the ground and slowly advanced. From time to time, it would stop and sneak a few glances at its surroundings before continuing to crawl. Suddenly, this gerbil stopped about 300 meters away from Xiaolingyu. Moreover, its eyes were fixed on Xiaolingyu, as if it had discovered something. Through its perception, it sensed a weak but very special aura in front of it. It had never sensed this aura before and was unable to distinguish it. What exactly was in front of it? Could it be some kind of treasure? This gerbil hesitated for a while before slowly crawling towards Xiaolingyu. Moreover, it appeared to be on full alert. It reckoned that as long as something slightly wrong happened, it would immediately escape into the sand. When that gerbil was less than 200 meters away from Xiaolingyu, it suddenly stopped again and acted as if it was about to drill into the sand. Unfortunately, this distance was really too short. Before its entire body had completely sunk into the sand, it felt that one of its hind legs had already been grabbed. Moreover, a special and powerful energy had already entered its body, imprisoning its entire body. Xiaolingyu gently pulled the gerbil out. Then, she used a soul attack to knock it out. Then, Xiaolingyu chose another place to hide. After restraining her aura, she threw the unconscious gerbil 200 feet away. The unconscious gerbil lay motionless on the ground. Xiao Lingyu had already released the shackles on it, and its unique scent spread out in all directions. Not long after, some desert eagles came over. However, they were all desert eagles that had not reached the mystic demon realm, so Xiao Lingyu could only scare them away. On this night, no mystic demon stage, equivalent to a 9 heavens mystic immortal, Sha Ying approached Xiao Lingyu, so he still did not have any substantial gains. However, Xiao Lingyu discovered an advantage of hunting gerbils, and that was that the gerbils were not familiar with his energy aura, and it would arouse their curiosity. If he released a little bit of his chaotic mana aura with that in mind, he did so on another night. Gerbil demons actually had another characteristic, and that was that their sense of smell was very sharp. At least, it was much sharper than those desert eagles' sense of smell. Therefore, when Xiao Lingyu slightly released the aura of chaos magic power, the gerbil demons could sense it, but the desert eagles flying in the air could not. If he wanted those desert eagles to sense it, Xiao Lingyu had to release a very strong aura fluctuation. However, this would scare those desert eagles away. More and more gerbils rushed over after smelling the chaotic mana aura. As long as their cultivation was not at the mystic demon stage, they would be scared away by Xiao Lingyu. After a night, there were still no mystic demon stage desert eagles flying over, but Xiao Lingyu captured another 5 mystic demon stage gerbils alive. Just like that, Xiao Lingyu wantonly captured the mystic demon stage gerbils while patiently waiting for the mystic demon stage desert eagles to appear. According to the experience of those falconers, as long as there were enough gerbils as bait, hunting the desert eagles would definitely not be a problem. Sure enough, after waiting for nearly 2 months, a late-stage mystic demon stage desert eagle finally swooped down from the sky. Almost in the blink of an eye, that desert eagle reached the ground. Just as its sharp claws were about to grab the unconscious gerbils, Xiao Lingyu transformed into a silver light and attacked from several hundred feet away. Unfortunately, Xiao Lingyu was not an experienced falconer. Just as he flew over, that desert eagle had already flapped its wings and suddenly rose several hundred feet before disappearing into the dark night sky. The failure of this hunt did not affect Xiao Lingyu's confidence, and it was impossible for him to disappoint Xiao Lingyu. He only changed to another location and continued to wait patiently. After failing a few more times, Xiao Lingyu finally realized a problem. Those mystic demon stage desert eagles should be very familiar with this space. It was really too difficult for him to catch them. However, there was absolutely no need for him to catch them. He only needed to kill or injure them so that they could not fly away or fly at full speed. Thus, when another desert eagle descended from the sky, Xiao Lingyu directly used the silver moon broken saber to slash out a primal chaos saber ray. The speed of the primal chaos saber ray was naturally much faster than Xiao Lingyu's sudden rush, so it was able to hit that desert eagle without any mishaps. That desert eagle's wings were as hard as metal and covered more than half of its body. However, when it fell at extreme speed, its wings were unable to protect its neck and head, and its neck was the target of Xiao Lingyu's attack. Even though the desert eagle's skin and flesh were very tough, it was impossible for it to block the primal chaos saber ray's attack. When the primal chaos saber ray flashed past, its head was separated from its body. At this moment, Xiao Lingyu pounced forward, took the desert eagle's head, and quickly sealed it. As for the desert eagle's headless body, Xiao Lingyu threw it into the spirit beast pouch for the strange young beast that also possessed primal chaos magic to devour. After that, Xiao Lingyu used the silver moon broken saber to cut open the desert eagle's head, and took out a palm-sized lump of crystal. The earthen yellow crystal no longer contained any other types of energy. The only thing it contained was a very pure soul power. Cultivators could directly absorb it to easily refine the soul power within it. That was why the sand crystal was so precious. It's such a waste to give such a good treasure to others. Xiao Lingyu rubbed the sand crystal, and thought somewhat unwillingly. Unfortunately, he was currently lacking immortal crystals to issue missions. Xiaoling thought about it again and again, and finally put away the sand crystal. Half a year later, Xiaoling collected 10 sand crystals as he wished, and returned to the mercenary division's building in Zoawaru City. After handing the 10 sand crystals to the counter and withdrawing 200,000 immortal crystals, Xiaoling felt much more comfortable. If it were not for the fact that he had so many immortal crystals, he would absolutely not be willing to give away a treasure that was very useful to him to others. It would take about a year to collect 10 sand crystals and earn 200,000 immortal crystals, and 5 million immortal crystals would take more than 20 years. Xiaoling calculated as he walked to the center of the first floor of the Mercenary Division's building and looked for a suitable mission on the light screen on the wall. There were many missions to collect sand crystals, but most of them were to collect 1 or 2 sand crystals. Xiaoling wanted to accept missions that required more than 10 sand crystals. After all, a round trip would take some time. When he arrived at the counter again, Xiaoling accepted another mission to collect 15 sand crystals, paid the deposit of 7,500 immortal crystals, and left. After staying in the Sand Eagle Hill for another 1.5 years, Xiaoling once again returned to the first floor of the Mercenary Division in Rowan City. What Xiaoling did not expect was that when he arrived at the counter, the gentle and pretty fairy with a smile on her face told him that someone had completed the mission before him, and the reward had already been claimed by that person. Xiaoling already knew that anyone could accept the missions issued by the Mercenary Division. Moreover, after you accepted the mission, others could also accept it. Whoever completed the mission first would be able to get the reward. Of course, the cultivator who completed the mission later would be able to claim back the deposit that he had paid. Since you have 15 sand crystals, then you can accept the same mission. After accepting the mission, you will have completed the mission, and you can directly take the reward. This will not affect you much after all, there are too many missions to collect sand crystals here. After returning the 7,500 immortal crystals, the fairy smiled and comforted him. Your idea is not bad. Xiaoling did as he was told, and sure enough, he received a reward of 300,000 immortal crystals. Why do I still need to accept missions? I can just go and get 200 or 300 sand crystals, and then continue to accept missions and continue to receive rewards. Xiaoling seemed to have been inspired, and he happily headed towards the Sand Eagle Hill. This time, he would not be back anytime soon. Previously, Xiaoling had only thought of one thing, which was that he could accept many missions to collect sand crystals at once, and then after collecting all the sand crystals, he would return to the missions one by one to receive the reward. However, at that time, he had considered that this would take too long, and that the missions he accepted would be completed by others first. He had neglected the fact that there would be people who wanted the sand crystals he collected. After arriving at the Sand Eagle Hill with familiarity, Xiaoling was stopped by a group of cultivators. He originally thought that he had encountered bandits, but unexpectedly, they did not attack him. Instead, they invited him to join their mercenary division, and said that they would enter the Sand Eagle Hill together to collect sand crystals. There were a total of 7 cultivators in this group, and the highest cultivation base was only at the peak of the late-stage 9 Heavens Xian Immortal Realm. Most of them were only at the mid-stage 9 Heavens Xian Immortal Realm. Everyone knew that if they wanted to gain something from the Sand Eagle Hill, they had to be at least at the early stage of the Immortal Monarch Realm. However, there were also many cultivators below the early stage of the Immortal Monarch Realm who formed groups to hunt the sand eagles, but it was extremely dangerous because once they encountered a large group of strong sand eagles, it was very likely that their entire group would be wiped out. Therefore, they would usually recruit a lot of people, and cultivators at the early stage of the Immortal Monarch Realm were usually unwilling to join such a group. In the next few days, the Sand Eagle Hill will be more dangerous than other times. Fellow Taoist, it's better for you to travel with us, a cultivator advised. I'm used to being alone. Sorry. Chapter 355. From Xiao Lingyu's point of view, the group of cultivators was just trying to scare him when they said that Sand Eagle Hill would be very dangerous in the near future. Although he didn't know much about Sand Eagle Hill, he had stayed here for a period of time and didn't see any signs of danger. Tens of thousands of kilometers into Sand Eagle Hill, Xiao Lingyu stopped beside an ordinary sand dune. He then hid in the sand and quietly waited for night to come. When night fell, darkness shrouded the earth. The whistling wind seemed to be stronger than during the day. Xiao Lingyu threw a mystic demon stage gerbil 20 meters away and released some of his chaos magic power. The gerbil had already fainted and was lying motionless on the sand, emitting an aura that was very tempting to the sand eagles. When ordinary sand eagles flew down, Xiao Lingyu would increase the fluctuations of his chaos magic power to scare them away. When sand eagles of Mystic Demon stage flew down, he would use his silver moon broken saber to shoot out chaotic blade rays to attack their necks. In this way, Xiao Lingyu was like an experienced eagle hunter, constantly reaping the lives of the sand eagles of Mystic Demon stage. The number of sand crystals in his storage magic treasure gradually increased. Although carrying out this task was dull and tedious, Xiao Lingyu could only endure it in order to find Anya as soon as possible. The chaos magic power he emitted could indeed attract many gerbil demons. Moreover, the gerbil demons that could smell or sense the fluctuations of chaos magic power were mostly not weak. As long as they dared to come within 20 meters of Xiao Lingyu, it would be extremely difficult for them to escape. Generally, one gerbil was enough to be used as bait. The rest of the gerbil demons became the exotic cub's delicacies, like the headless sand eagles. During the day, when he was idle and had nothing to do, Xiao Lingyu would also release the exotic cub. Because the immortal world also had chaos magic power, the exotic cub could also absorb the chaos magic power in the immortal world to cultivate. However, the exotic cub's cultivation speed was too slow by absorbing the thin chaos magic power in the immortal world. Xiao Lingyu would also inject his energy into the cub's body every once in a while to help it quickly improve its cultivation. In addition, the exotic cub could also increase its cultivation by digesting the energy of the gerbil demons or sand eagles. Currently, the exotic cub would often spit out some beads that contained pure chaos magic power. Moreover, its cultivation had already reached the peak of the late Mystic Demon stage. The reason Xiao Lingyu often released the exotic cub was that no matter how many gerbil demons or sand eagles it ate, the cub's cultivation would not improve. He felt that the exotic cub had reached a bottleneck. Of course, the exotic cub's cultivation. The exotic cub was also very obedient. Every time it came out, it wouldn't run too far away, and it would take the initiative to come back soon. Although this fellow's cultivation is no longer improving, his realm is becoming more and more stable. Does it need this kind of sand crystal to improve its soul realm before it can break through? Although this kind of sand crystal contains rich and pure soul energy, it would probably require a lot of sand crystals to improve the soul realm from the late Mystic Demon stage to the early Demon Monarch stage. After all, the gap between the two stages is too big. There are two main reasons why it could break through so many times in the past. First, its cultivation was too weak, so it was relatively easy for it to make progress. Second, with my help, it used to devour the energy of magical beasts that were much stronger than it. If it wants to break through to the early Immortal Monarch stage, it would probably need to devour the energy of a few Immortal Monarch stage demonic beasts. Xiao Lingyu thought seriously as he stroked the exotic cub that was lying on his arm. If this exotic cub reached the Demon Monarch stage, it would really be a great help to him. It would make it much easier for him to fight his enemies in the future. Just as he thought of this, Xiao Lingyu's expression suddenly changed. He first put the exotic cub into the spirit beast pouch, then completely retracted his aura and dove a few meters into the sand. The reason why he dodged without hesitation was that Xiao Lingyu suddenly felt a strong aura surging toward him. In his mind, there were countless desert eagles gathering in the sky not far away. They were like a huge wave that was rapidly advancing toward him. It was like an endless yellow cloud. The aura released by those desert eagles was overwhelming. Even though Xiaolingyu was not weak, he did not dare to be targeted by them. Moreover, he could vaguely sense that there should be many immortal monarch stage existences among those desert eagles. He hid underground and waited for nearly an hour before the countless desert eagles flew over Xiaolingyu's head. Xiaolingyu flew out from the ground and stood in midair. He spread out his mind completely, but he did not see a single desert eagle nearby. Originally, there were many desert eagles with weak cultivation in the surroundings, but now they had obviously joined the group of desert eagles just now. He did not know where they were going. They are moving on such a large scale. If they are not migrating, then they must have encountered danger. Desert Eagle Hill is the only place where they gather and live on the Zoawaru continent. They must not be migrating. Could they have encountered danger? Xiaolingyu's expression darkened. He could not help but think of the warning of the few cultivators he met outside Desert Eagle Hill when he first arrived. In the next few days, Desert Eagle Hill will be more dangerous than other times. Could it be true? Regardless of whether it was true or not, Xiaolingyu felt that he had to leave Desert Eagle Hill as soon as possible. No matter how important the mission was, it was not as important as his own life. After making up his mind, he flew toward Zoawaru City at full speed. However, not long after he took off and before he could increase his speed to the maximum, Xiaolingyu already felt a gust of wind coming from behind him at an extremely fast speed. In his mind, at this time, a gust of wind was blowing behind him. Yellow sand was rolling, covering the sky and the sun. Countless huge round stones were rolling in the gust of wind and flying toward him. The scene looked very frightening. Countless huge round stones rolling forward was a characteristic sight of the Zoawaru continent. They could be seen almost everywhere on this continent, but this kind of situation where a gust of wind and yellow sand filled the sky was really rare. Oh no! Xiaolingyu only let out a low cry. The yellow sand behind him had already drowned him, and he did not even have the chance to fall into the ground. The gust of wind was like a knife, blowing Xiaolingyu's defensive light shield until it trembled. The sand in the gust of wind kept hitting it. Over time, his defensive light shield was broken. Before he could cast his defensive light shield again, countless sand had already hit his body. Even though the quality of his body was already very high, Xiaolingyu could clearly feel the pain coming from the places where he was hit by the sand. He cast his defensive light shield again, but in the next moment, he was hit by another round stone. Although the defensive light shield was not broken, his body involuntarily rolled and danced with the round stones. The gust of wind was too strong. Even Xiaolingyu found it difficult to stabilize his body. He could only move with the gust of wind because this could reduce the probability of being hit by the round stones. After all, he and the round stones were moving in the same direction, and their speed was about the same. Even if he was hit, there would not be any danger. However, in this way, if the gust of wind did not stop, Xiaolingyu would be trapped in it forever. And if he hoped for the gust of wind to stop, who knew how many years it would take? After moving with the wind for a full month, Xiaolingyu still did not see any signs of the gust of wind stopping. Just as he was thinking of other solutions, Xiaolingyu suddenly realized that this terrifying gust of wind had actually caught up with a group of desert eagles. There were also many desert eagles, so many that it was impossible to count. However, after being caught by the gust of wind, their bodies were constantly pulled into the gust of wind, and then countless sand particles pierced through their bodies. In an instant, the bodies of the desert eagles that entered the gust of wind completely collapsed. They did not even have time to let out a cry. The gust of wind was still moving forward rapidly, but it was as if it had grown eyes. It chased after this group of desert eagles relentlessly. No matter how they changed their direction, the gust of wind would continue to chase and devour them. What is that? Suddenly, Xiaoling Yu saw a shiny yellow crystal in the gust of wind. Isn't that a sand crystal? After recovering from his shock, Xiaoling Yu used all his strength to move over and grab that yellow crystal. After carefully sensing it, he discovered that it contained extremely pure soul power. His face was filled with joy. This should have been left behind by those mystic demon realm desert eagles that died in the gust of wind. After thinking about this, Xiaoling Yu no longer thought about how to leave this gust of wind that covered an unknown expanse. Instead, he searched for sand crystals in the gust of wind. The gust of wind had devoured countless desert eagles, and the amount of sand crystals among them was rather impressive. However, by forcefully moving his position in the gust of wind, Xiaoling Yu would also have to endure the attacks from those sand particles and round rock. It was also because of his extremely high-quality body and some decent defensive techniques that he was able to continue persevering. After moving forward with the gust of wind for another 2 months, Xiaoling Yu had already obtained more than 60 sand crystals. He had no intention of leaving this gust of wind. Collecting sand crystals in this gust of wind saved him a lot of time compared to waiting bitterly on the desert eagle hill. As more and more desert eagles were caught up by this gust of wind, the number of sand crystals in the gust of wind also increased. Xiaoling Yu was at the front of this gust of wind. Almost all of those desert eagles had died in front of his eyes. Therefore, he was able to collect the sand crystals before they were destroyed by the sand particles and round rock. If he was at the middle or tail of this gust of wind, it would probably be very difficult for him to obtain a single sand crystal. This gust of wind seemed to have no end. Xiaoling Yu had been trapped in this gust of wind for a full 2 years and had obtained close to 1,000 sand crystals. However, this gust of wind still existed. What made Xiaoling Yu even more puzzled was that this strange gust of wind continued to wreak havoc on the Desert Eagle Hill but did not rush out of the range of the Desert Eagle Hill. Chapter 356. At the same time, Xiaoling Yu also realized that the wind was getting faster and faster. Naturally, the speed of the sand and pebbles in the wind was also faster than before. With the increase in speed, the attack power naturally increased as well. Gradually, Xiaoling Yu no longer dared to move his position easily. Even if there were sand crystals flying in front of his eyes, he could only look at them. Once he moved to take them, he would be hit by countless sand and pebbles, and his entire body would be in intense pain. However, if he was lucky, the sand crystals would sometimes come to him automatically. However, such situations were very rare, and it was rare to encounter one in a month. More than a year passed. As the wind was too fast, the sand eagles that were swept in would not only be annihilated instantly, but their sand crystals would also shatter at the same time. Xiaoling Yu could no longer obtain sand crystals from the wind, but he also could not escape from the wind at such a fast speed. Even moving was very dangerous, let alone charging out. He could only rely on the high quality of his physical body to not resist the wind's push and maintain the same speed as the wind. This way, even if the pebbles or sand hit him, the impact would not be too strong, and he would be able to persevere for a long time. No matter how strong the gale was, Xiaoling Yu reckoned that it wouldn't be able to easily destroy him. However, if he were to force his way out, not only would he be heavily injured, he might not even be able to kill his way out. Another year passed. It was unknown whether the wind had finally exhausted its power or it had already swept through the entire Sand Eagle Hill, but in any case, the wind stopped. Although it stopped, it did not disappear. Instead, it formed a huge wind pillar that stood between heaven and earth like a swaying dragon. From afar, the wind pillar in the middle of Sand Eagle Hill seemed to connect heaven and earth. However, the wind pillar became thinner and thinner, and its speed of rotation became faster and faster. Even the extremely high-quality round stones were becoming smaller and smaller in size. Everything in the wind pillar seemed to be annihilated and turned into ashes as it spun at such a high speed. Everything that was split or crushed gathered at the center of the wind pillar, causing the space in the middle of the wind pillar to become smaller and smaller. Gradually, it was filled with substance. The wind speed at the center of the wind pillar was the weakest. Xiao Lingyu tried to rush out, but as soon as she moved, she was swept into the center of the wind pillar. The surroundings were either filled with dust or extremely high-quality materials. Not only did Xiao Lingyu feel a little dizzy, but she also felt like her body was being torn apart by a huge force. The pillar of wind lasted for nearly 4 hours before it slowly dissipated. However, it did not disappear. Instead, it drilled into the ground like a long dragon sinking into the earth. Xiao Lingyu relied on her strong physical body to hold on until the end, but her body was also involuntarily pulled into the sand. The gale that had originally covered a wide area had now been compressed into a single gust of wind that carried countless high-quality substances. It was like an earth dragon that moved swiftly under Sand Eagle Hill, but it was like a dragon swimming in the sea without any restrictions. As he sped along, he dived deeper and deeper. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea had passed, this gust of wind rushed towards a cave that was tens of thousands of feet underground. This cave was not very long, and Gale only took a breath to reach the end. However, at the end of the cave was a pitch-black space. The gale had dissipated, and the surroundings were deathly silent. The substances that were originally condensed together due to the rapid rotation of the gale were now slowly splitting apart. Xiao Lingyu used the silver moon-broken sword to split open the hard substances around him, and only then did he manage to escape. What is this place? Looking at the pitch-black surroundings, Xiao Lingyu's brows furrowed. In an unknown place, Xiao Lingyu did not dare to release her aura, nor did she dare to use her mind to casually scan the surroundings. First, she waited quietly for a while, then she aimed in a direction and slowly flew away. After flying for less than 100 breaths, Xiao Lingyu's expression suddenly changed. This was because in front of him, there was a glowing yellow liquid that was surging towards him like a river. Feeling the terrifying energy contained in the liquid, Xiao Lingyu immediately turned around and retreated. However, what he did not expect was that just as he retreated to his original position, he was shocked to find that the yellow liquid was surging towards him from all directions. It seemed that the liquid was here to drown the substances that had just been swept over by the gale. With a thought, the 6 demon-suppressing immortal orbs first flew out of his body and formed a sacred light shield around him. Then, Xiao Lingyu used the Chaos Demonic Power and Primal Chaos Fire to form 2 defensive shields. What surprised Xiao Lingyu was that the high-quality substances began to dissolve rapidly after being submerged by the yellow liquid. A moment later, the liquid surrounded the Divine Light Barrier, but the Divine Light Barrier only lasted for less than 10 breaths of time before it was broken. Xiao Lingyu had just put away the 6 demon-suppressing immortal orbs when the defense formed by the Primal Chaos Fire and Chaos Demonic Power had already collapsed. Without any hesitation, Xiao Lingyu's body suddenly disappeared from where he was standing. A small house that was only the size of a palm and glowing with colorful light appeared where he had just disappeared. Xiao Lingyu hid in the spiritual abode. After years of familiarizing himself with it and refining it day and night, he had mastered one function of the spiritual abode. However, this one function was enough. This function was to store his body in the spiritual abode. At a critical moment it could save his life. However, after entering the spiritual abode, Xiao Lingyu could not make the spiritual abode move at all. The spiritual abode would hover motionlessly in the same place. It was also because of this that Xiao Lingyu had not used the spiritual abode before. He had always felt that he should be able to charge out. Moreover, he had always felt that this gale was definitely not formed naturally. It might have been created by some powerful existence. Otherwise, why would it specifically hunt the desert eagles? Why would it be as if it had grown eyes? If it was really some powerful existence that had created this gale, he would definitely be in big trouble if he rashly used the spiritual abode. Therefore, not only did he not use the spiritual abode before, but he also did not even take out the silver moon broken blade ever since he was swept up by the gale. Until now, when danger was imminent, he had no other choice but to hide in the spiritual abode. The yellow liquid that came from all directions instantly gathered together and drowned the spiritual abode. Inside the spiritual abode, Xiaolingyu could see the situation outside. He felt his scalp tingle when he saw that the substances that could harm him when moving at high speed had already dissolved. However, the spiritual abode was a divine artifact and could not be dissolved by the liquid. Even the colorful light shield released by the spiritual abode could easily block the erosion of the liquid. Only 100 breaths had passed, and almost all of the substances that were swept in by the gale had been dissolved. The liquid continued to wash the spiritual abode, but it could not do anything to it. Xiaolingyu felt a little relieved, but his expression was still very serious because it was obvious that he was trapped here. Although the liquid could not break through the defense of the spiritual abode, it could use the powerful thrust to move the spiritual abode. Xiaolingyu could only hide inside, but he was powerless to control the movement of the spiritual abode or resist the powerful thrust. He could only watch as the spiritual abode was pushed back into the cave. Not long after, the spiritual abode was washed out of the cave by the liquid. The strange thing was that the liquid seemed to be controlled by someone. Not a single drop flowed out of the cave. There was sand all around. It seemed calm and Xiaolingyu had escaped danger. However, he felt that the situation was too strange. If he went out now, he might be instantly killed. At this point, he did not believe that the gale was formed naturally, and he did not believe that the yellow liquid had released the spiritual abode for no reason. This seemingly calm place was definitely hiding a murderous intent. Perhaps the moment he went out, danger would immediately pounce on him. Xiaolingyu felt that the danger should come from that cave. His gaze was fixed on that cave, and he carefully observed it. The calm continued, as if there was no danger at all. Even so, Xiaolingyu did not dare to come out. He felt that the other party was competing with him in patience. Xiaolingyu's patience had always been poor. Now that he was in a hurry to earn immortal crystals to post the mission and find Anya, his patience was even worse. He was aware of this fact, but he couldn't calm himself down to meditate. Instead, he took out a sand crystal and slowly absorbed the spiritual energy within it. When he returned to submit the mission, he only needed about 200 sand crystals. Now that he had 1,000 sand crystals, he could naturally squander them. The pure soul power in the sand crystal slowly entered his body, then flowed into his dantian. Finally, it was absorbed by the Chaos Demon nascent soul, which then sent it into the Chaos Golden Bead. Xiaolingyu could clearly feel that his soul power was increasing. Although the speed was not very fast, it was not slow either. After completely absorbing 3 sand crystals, Xiaolingyu's soul realm successfully broke through to the early stage of the mystic demon realm. Originally, forcefully increasing one's soul realm was a very dangerous thing to do. However, Xiaolingyu already had the strength comparable to a demon monarch, and he often fought with monarch experts. Secondly, the soul power in the sand crystals was very pure. Therefore, the risk of Xiaolingyu increasing his soul realm by such a large margin was very low. However, every time he increased a small realm, Xiaolingyu would have to stop and carefully comprehend it. He would only continue to increase his soul realm after familiarizing himself with it. In this way, the time passed quickly. After using more than 300 sand crystals, Xiaolingyu's soul realm reached the peak of the late stage of the mystic demon realm. Unfortunately, his soul golden bead was no longer accepting the soul power from the sand crystals. It was as if it had eaten its fill. Xiaolingyu knew that he had reached a bottleneck. Purely absorbing the soul power from the outside world would not allow his soul to advance to the monarch rank. He had to completely comprehend everything about the mystic demon realm. Only then could his soul sublimate. Chapter 357. Xiao Lingyu's soul realm had reached the mid-stage of the chaotic void refinement realm, since he was in the late stage of the mystical demon realm. Therefore, he could increase his cultivation level by increasing the amount of chaotic demonic nascent soul. Increasing his cultivation level was actually very simple for Xiao Lingyu. After familiarizing himself with his realm, he took out many demonic crystals and piled them up beside him. Then, he began to absorb the rich and pure demonic spiritual energy within and used the 9-revolution chaos mantra to convert it into chaotic demonic spiritual energy. The 4-colored halo above the chaotic demonic nascent soul's head became more and more solid as it spun faster and faster, indicating that Xiao Lingyu's cultivation level was getting stronger. The time used to increase his soul realm and cultivation level was close to 20 years in total. When Xiao Lingyu finished cultivating, everything around the spiritual abode was as peaceful as usual. Could it be that I guessed wrong and there's no danger here at all? Xiao Lingyu could not help but feel nervous. Resisting the urge to go out immediately, Xiao Lingyu began to study the chaotic demonic seal, the demonic soul splitting palm, the advanced demonic curse technique, and the formless gigantic demonic technique. Xiao Lingyu also needed to increase the power of these auxiliary cultivation techniques that relied on the increase of one's realm to the maximum under his current realm. This improvement required comprehension and practice. Especially the advanced demonic curse technique, there were many types of them. If they were combined with other attacks, the effect would be doubled. Moreover, there were not many cultivators in the immortal world who knew demonic curse technique. Using demonic curse techniques to fight against enemies would definitely have a miraculous effect. With so many auxiliary cultivation techniques to cultivate, it naturally took a lot of time. More than 10 years passed like this. Before Xiao Lingyu finished his cultivation, there was already a commotion outside. Outside the spiritual abode, a ball of orange flames surged out from the cave and completely enveloped the spiritual abode. I knew you couldn't help it. I want to go out, but you're even more curious. Xiao Lingyu's lips curled into a knowing smile. He stopped his cultivation and stared at the orange flames outside. This orange flame was obviously not weak, but unfortunately, even after burning for a long time, it was still unable to break through the colorful light shield released by the divine dwellings. However, it was able to cause the light shield to ripple slightly. This lasted for nearly a month before the orange flame returned to the cave. However, there was a powerful suction force that pulled the divine abode back into the cave. When it was only 10 meters away from the entrance, the suction force suddenly disappeared. Then, Xiao Lingyu saw that the outside world seemed to tremble. Above and below the spiritual abode, 2 rows of sharp sword-like spikes appeared and pierced towards the spiritual abode at the same time. Looking at those spikes, Xiao Lingyu felt that they were a bit like teeth, and the current situation was like a huge demonic beast that wanted to bite through the defenses of the spiritual abode. Teeth were the hardest part of most demonic beasts and human cultivators, and the strength of their bite was the strongest force that everyone could unleash in an instant. However, at this time, it was still uncertain whether the 2 rows of spikes were teeth or whether they belonged to a certain demonic beast. Although the defensive light shield of the spiritual abode was strong, it was formed spontaneously. As the owner of the spiritual abode, Xiao Lingyu did not provide enough energy to support it. Under the tremendous force of the 2 spikes, it exploded with a bang. The 2 spikes then hit the main body of the spiritual abode. The spiritual abode suddenly shook, causing Xiao Lingyu, who was hiding in it, to sway continuously. Xiao Lingyu's expression changed at first, but then he smiled because the 2 spikes broke the moment they hit the spiritual abode, because they used too much force, and because their quality was far inferior to the spiritual abode. Roar! An earth-shattering roar reverberated from the depths of Sand Eagle Hill, so that the cultivators in Zuwan City could hear it clearly. The cultivators near or in Sand Eagle Hill were all horrified. They all looked at Sand Eagle Hill and then quickly left. Xiao Lingyu, who was in the spiritual abode, did not hear the roar. He only felt that the outside world was shaking even more violently, and the spiritual abode was also constantly shaking. However, at this time, the spiritual abode had been pushed out of the cave by a gust of wind, and its position suddenly rose by tens of thousands of feet, directly from the depths of the ground to the surface. Then, Xiaoling was surprised to see a huge demonic beast's head facing the spiritual abode. The underground cave from before was really the demonic beast's mouth, and the 2 rows of spikes were its teeth. The 2 broken teeth had obviously angered this demonic beast. At this time, it was staring at the spiritual abode with a pair of earthy yellow eyes that were filled with anger. The spiritual abode was currently being dragged by one of the demonic beast's huge palms. After taking a closer look, Xiaoling discovered that this was a tortoise-shaped demonic beast. Tortoise-shaped demonic beasts were generally not tall, but this one was tens of thousands of feet tall. It looked like a huge flat mountain. If a tortoise-shaped demonic beast was tens of thousands of feet tall, then its body was at least tens of thousands of feet long. Not to mention its cultivation, just its body was enough to frighten people. Tortoise-shaped demonic beasts generally liked to sleep, and once they slept, they did not know when they would wake up. Their cultivation progress was generally very slow, but a long time would not consume too much of their life essence. They could also slowly improve their cultivation while sleeping. Although it was slow, it was very solid. Another point was that tortoise-shaped demonic beasts were known for their strong defense, especially the Earth-type tortoise-shaped beasts. This was an Earth-type tortoise-shaped beast, and from its appearance, it was probably a black tortoise with a very noble bloodline. Its bloodline was second only to super divine beasts, but it was higher than most upper divine beasts. Even though it was a black tortoise with a very strong cultivation, it was helpless in the face of the spiritual abode. It seems that I was swept into its stomach by the fierce wind. That yellow liquid should be what it uses to digest things. Xiaoling was not very nervous at the moment. With the protection of the spiritual abode, unless the other party had an even higher level divine artifact, she would not be in any danger. However, demonic beasts with a very high cultivation and a very noble bloodline like this often had some incredible magical powers. What made Xiaoling very strange was that such a high-level demonic beast should be in the demon realm. Even if it grew up in the immortal realm, why would the immortals allow it to grow? Even if they allowed it, it was probably under her surveillance. After staring at the spiritual abode for a while, the black tortoise demonic beast slowly opened its mouth, then closed it again, then opened it again, then closed it again. Seeing the other party's mouth opening and closing at an increasing speed, Xiaoling became nervous again. The other party was obviously chanting an incantation. It only took a few breaths of time to chant an incantation. Then, an invisible wave of energy acted on the spiritual abode, causing it to vibrate continuously. Inside the spiritual abode, Xiaoling suddenly felt as if the spiritual abode was rejecting him, as if his body would be separated from the spiritual abode at any moment. This greatly alarmed Xiaoling. His mental connection with the spiritual abode was gradually being deceived. Fortunately, this wave of incantations could not continue forever. Unfortunately, the black tortoise demonic beast started chanting again. However, before the next wave of incantations could be heard, 2 immortals had rushed over and attacked as soon as they arrived. The black tortoise demonic beast stopped chanting and opened its mouth to spit out a gust of wind that swept towards the 2 immortals. The 2 immortals did not know what cultivation realm they were at. Even with their combined strength, they were unable to withstand the gust of wind. In a breath's time, they were both swept into the black tortoise demonic beast's mouth, and would probably be digested by the yellow liquid. After dealing with the 2 immortals, the black tortoise demonic beast prepared to chant another incantation, but more and more immortals flew over. Sand Eagle Mound was actually not very far from Wakwan City. Even if Xiaoling did not use all his strength, he would only need 3 days to cross this distance. As for immortals with cultivation at the late stage of immortal monarch or higher, they would be able to reach this place very quickly. Especially for some immortal emperor-level experts, they could almost reach Sand Eagle Mound from Wakwan City in a few breaths of time. The Zoawara continent was a famous continent in the west of the immortal world. Naturally, there was no lack of immortal emperors. With such a big commotion at Sand Eagle Hill, the experts on the Zoawara continent, or experts from other continents, all rushed over to check it out. When they saw such a huge tortoise beast, they were all shocked at first and then began to attack. The black tortoise demonic beast hid its true cultivation, and its aura and aura were also very tightly restrained. The immortals who came here did not know its strength. Seeing that there were so many immortals, they dared to attack. However, after attacking once, they regretted it. This was because gusts of wild wind blew out of the black tortoise demonic beast's mouth. Most of the immortals who could not dodge in time were directly sucked into the black tortoise demonic beast's mouth, and never came out again. Quick, look! It has a divine item in its palm. A sharp-eyed immortal spotted the divine abode and shouted when he saw it glowing with colorful light. The immortals who had been preparing to leave, because they thought the demonic turtle demonic beast was too powerful, all stopped. Some took out their communication immortal beads, while others continued to attack. In short, although immortals were constantly being swept away by the wild wind, more and more immortals gathered in the surroundings. Streams of light flew over from all directions without stopping, interweaving into a large net of flowing light. However, the black tortoise demonic beast did not move. No matter how those streams of light transformed from immortal talismans and immortal treasures hit it, they could only blast open the hard layer of stone on its body. They were unable to pose any threat to it. However, it had just cast a spell on the divine abode. Moreover, it had spent some time with Shaolin Yu. Its patience had long since worn out. Naturally, it would not allow these immortals to continue attacking it. After waiting for a while, it blew out several gusts of wild wind. However, it did not let the gusts of wind attack, but instead let them revolve around itself. The wild wind spun rapidly, sweeping up countless grains of sand and large round stones. Any attack that entered the wild wind would be struck by the sand or stones, unable to land on the black tortoise demonic beast's body. Chapter 358. Inside Sand Eagle Hill, several gusts of wind spun wildly around a huge turtle beast, forming a circle with a diameter of 150,000 feet. Outside the circle were countless immortals. They kept bombarding it with immortal talismans and immortal treasures, but they couldn't penetrate the circle of wind at all. What kind of monster is causing trouble here? Suddenly, an angry roar reverberated from the depths of Sand Eagle Hill, followed by a giant palm slamming down from the sky. The giant palm blotted out the sky and was at least 100,000 meters tall. Its entire body glowed with golden light, and when it slammed down, the space of the world of immortals trembled violently. When the surrounding immortals saw the giant palm, they knew it was a powerhouse from the world of immortals. They quickly retreated to avoid being injured. Boom! The huge palm landed and easily dispersed the gale. It even landed heavily on the back of the black tortoise. An earthy yellow light flashed and scattered the golden palm. The tortoise raised its head and roared angrily. The incantation was interrupted again, and Shaolin Yu's mental connection with the divine abode became clear again. The black tortoise? I didn't expect it to be you, old bastard. What are you trying to do by hiding in the world of immortals and refusing to return to the world of monsters? In midair, a vigorous and angry curse came, shaking the world to the point that it trembled. Everyone looked to the sky, but they couldn't see anything. Roar! The black tortoise only responded with an angry roar. Then, a stream of orange flames shot out from its mouth and into the sky like a long river. As soon as the orange flames reached the sky, they were scattered by another giant golden palm. The tortoise monster's defense was invincible, but its attack power paled in comparison. But who didn't have a few tricks up their sleeve? After the black tortoise's true fire was scattered, it slammed its two front claws on the ground, causing the entire Sand Eagle Hill to shake violently, and a few wide gullies appeared on the ground. Then, its two huge eyes shot out two beams of orange light at the same time, piercing into the sky like two gigantic swords. Shockingly, two black holes immediately appeared in the sky, and the two black holes kept moving, forcing an old man in a Taoist robe to show himself. This old man had white hair and a white beard. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and stood on a five-colored auspicious cloud. He looked like an immortal with a dignified aura. After the old man appeared, the auspicious cloud beneath his feet carried him and slowly descended. Among the surrounding crowd, a person stepped forward to welcome him. That person seemed to be middle-aged and was dressed in a long azure robe. Once he approached the old man, he bowed and said, "Junior Mu Qing from the Wood Sect greets Senior Hu Yunzi." "Senior Hu Yunzi. Heavenly Tao Sect's Senior Immortal Venerable Hu Yunzi. Why is he here? Where did this demonic beast come from? It actually managed to attract Senior Hu Yunzi and even dared to attack him?" When the surrounding cultivators heard Mu Qing's words, quite a few of them who had heard of Hu Yunzi's name began to discuss among themselves. "The younger generation will surpass us in time. Little Mu Qing, you've already reached the peak of the late stage of the immortal emperor realm." Hu Yunzi seemed to know Mu Qing, but he only glanced at him. As he spoke, his gaze was still fixed on the black tortoise below. The peak of the late stage of the immortal emperor realm was only half a step away from the immortal venerable realm, but this half step could be described as the difference between heaven and earth. This was because those below the immortal venerable realm used immortal spiritual energy, while immortal venerables used divine energy. The peak of the late stage of the immortal emperor realm was still an immortal, but the immortal venerable realm was already at the divine realm. Therefore, Hu Yunzi didn't treat Mu Qing with courtesy. "Senior, where did this demonic tortoise come from?" Mu Qing asked, pointing below. "It's a demonic venerable that didn't return to the demon realm during the last great war between the immortal and demon realms. We've always known that it was in the immortal realm, but we didn't know where it was hiding. We also didn't know why it was hiding in the immortal realm," Hu Yunzi said with narrowed eyes. "It's been more than 200 million years since the last great war between the immortal and demon realms. For a demonic venerable to stay in the immortal realm for so long, it's definitely up to something big," said Mu Qing. "It's always been hiding in the immortal realm and hasn't done anything big. I reckon that even if it's up to something, it's not against the immortal realm," said Hu Yunzi, shaking his head. "If it's not against the immortal realm, then why is it hiding in the immortal realm?" asked Mu Qing, extremely confused. "Haha, a spatial crack is about to appear in the spatial barrier between the immortal and demon realms," said Hu Yunzi meaningfully. "Senior, you mean that it wants to go to the demon realm when the time comes?" asked Mu Qing, seeming to understand something. "That's just my guess," said Hu Yunzi with a smile. As the two of them spoke, the black tortoise's eyes released two more beams of orange light. They both shot towards Hu Yunzi in the sky. "Humph! This is the immortal realm. It's not a place where you can do as you please." Hu Yunzi snorted coldly. He suddenly swung his arm downwards. The silver-white threads of the horsetail whisk in his hand were like divine whips. They rapidly grew in size and met the two beams of light head-on. When the two collided, the silver-white threads released a dazzling golden light, completely suppressing the orange light. Then, Hu Yunzi waved his hand and released a beam of golden light. The golden light circled in the air for a while before transforming into a mountain-shaped magic treasure that smashed towards the black tortoise. As the magic treasure descended, it rapidly expanded, and it actually dragged a long spatial rift along the way. Moreover, it faintly revealed multicolored light, and its might was so strong that it caused the hearts of all the spectating cultivators to palpitate without end. The black tortoise was locked in place. With its enormous body, it was difficult for it to dodge, nor would it dodge. Its enormous shell began to shine with yellow light, and mysterious patterns began to circulate. Boom! The mountain smashed into the tortoise shell, but after a burst of orange light, it was shot into the sky. Have a taste of my 5 elements divine thunder! Huyunzi stepped on a colorful cloud and moved rapidly in the air. His hands were constantly forming seals, and his mouth was also chanting incantations. In a moment, the sky was suddenly covered by dark clouds. Bolts of lightning, like golden snakes dancing wildly, exploded in the sky. Crack! A bolt of golden lightning split the sky and descended, instantly landing on the black tortoise's shell. The black tortoise's defense was indeed invincible. Even when the divine lightning attack was launched by an immortal venerable, it only flashed with terrifying electric arcs when it landed on its shell. Apart from the anger on its face, there wasn't the slightest hint of pain on its face. However, the divine thunder that descended from the 9 heavens came one after another. With such a continuous attack, the black tortoise would not be able to withstand it for long. Roar! The black tortoise let out an earth-shattering roar. Gusts of wild wind gushed out, forming a wind pillar in a few moments. The wind pillar was like a long, vertical dragon. It swayed its body and towered into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds. At the same time, the black tortoise's 2 front claws were waving in front of its body. It actually summoned countless round stones and mountain peaks, all of which were smashed into the sky. It was very obvious that the black tortoise wanted to destroy the dark clouds in the sky. It did not want any more divine thunder to fall on its body. Unfortunately, Huyunzi would not let the black tortoise do as it wished. He continued to wave the horsetail whisk in his hand. Countless silver-white threads that shone with golden light swelled and flew towards the boulders and mountain peaks. As for the wind pillar, it was forcefully suppressed by Huyunzi's mountain-shaped magic treasure. The strength of human cultivators was that they were adept at using magic treasures and spells, while the Yao relied on their bodies and innate abilities. Such a battle could be said to have caused the heavens and earth to lose their color. The spectating cultivators retreated again and again, but they still felt that the aura on the other side was too strong. Xiaolingyu was in his divine abode. His heart trembled. Both the black tortoise and Huyunzi's methods were beyond his reach. This made him even more afraid to leave his divine abode. Although the black tortoise was fighting Huyunzi, the divine abode was still under its control. 6 directions divine thunder. Huyunzi changed his attack again. The dark clouds in the sky did not disperse, but the lightning within changed color. It was now purple-gold. Boom! The purple-gold divine thunder snaked down from the dark clouds. It carried with it a heart-palpitating aura of destruction, as if it could destroy everything in the world. The black tortoise was also very serious. The incantations on its shell circulated even faster. Rings of orange-yellow light appeared. The purple-gold divine thunder was unstoppable. It broke through 7 or 8 light barriers, but its power was exhausted in the end. It could not harm the black tortoise. However, after receiving the divine thunder's attack, the black tortoise suddenly slammed its 4 claws against the ground. Then, its colossal body actually soared into the air in an instant. It quickly shot off into the starry sky. Even though it was not proficient in speed, it was still a supreme-level divine beast. In a flash, the black tortoise had already pierced through the dark clouds above its head. It disappeared before the eyes of the countless spectating cultivators. Old bastard, don't run. Let's exchange a few more blows. It's not like I can kill you. What are you running for? After calling out, Huyunzi also disappeared in midair. The dark clouds in the sky naturally dispersed. When the world returned to normal and the surroundings returned to normal, no one could see the colossal black tortoise anymore, nor could they see the sage-like Huyunzi. It was very obvious that the 2 supreme-level experts had gone to battle in the starry sky. None of the immortals gave chase. They all knew that they could not catch up at all. Moreover, it was best not to watch a battle of this level. To Xiao Lingyu's astonishment, the Xuanwu tortoise didn't move very quickly at first, but just as Hu Yunzi was about to catch up, its body would suddenly shrink, and its speed would increase by a lot. Chapter 359. To regular cultivators, not only was crossing the galaxy extremely dangerous, it would take an extremely long time as well. However, this was nothing to exalt. They were all proficient in teleportation and could cross the vast expanse of space in a single flash. Even their speed surprised Xiao Lingyu. The black tortoise did not use teleportation. Instead, it continued to fly with its original form. Its seemingly clumsy and heavy body was like a flying ship. It was like an orange-yellow streak of light, flashing through the vast galaxy. Xiao Lingyu stood in his divine dwelling. He could only see countless stars flying around like streams of fire. He was unable to see the beautiful scenery of the immortals' world with his naked eye. The divine dwelling remained in the black tortoise's hand. It was firmly bound by an invisible force, unable to break free. Hu Yunzi seemed extremely patient as he followed behind it at a steady pace. He would call out from time to time, but the black tortoise would ignore him. 2 whole years passed like this before the black tortoise suddenly came to a stop. In front of it was an unknown continent of the celestial realm. Around the continent of the celestial realm were countless stars. The number of stars around the continent clearly far exceeded that of the other continents of the immortals' world. It could basically be described as densely packed together. The distance between the stars was not large either. The black tortoise stopped between the countless neighboring stars. Then, it let out a roar and turned its head to face Hu Yunzi, who had stopped nearby. Suddenly, it swung its claws forward, and a shocking scene unfolded. The surrounding stars actually all trembled at the same time before shooting towards Hu Yunzi like cannonballs under its control. He was able to move the galaxy with just a wave of his hand. The great divine ability of an honorable realm expert made Xiao Lingyu's expression change. In a single moment, almost 1,000 stars shot towards him. Hu Yunzi had no choice but to treat them with caution. He roared out, and the silvery white strands of the horsetail whisk in his hand swelled once again. They turned into long dragons and shot towards the countless stars. Hu Yunzi knew that the black tortoise was an earth elemental divine beast, and could indeed move the stars. After all, most of the stars were made up of earth elemental materials. Only earth elemental paragons could move the stars to attack on such a large scale. Even though Hu Yunzi's horsetail whisk was also a divine artifact, it could not do anything about the increasing number of stars that were hurtling towards him. All of the silver threads of his horsetail whisk were knocked back. Then, in an instant, Hu Yunzi was surrounded by stars that came from all directions. Countless stars gathered with Hu Yunzi at the center. Then, they collided with each other and exploded. The explosion of a planet could create a very powerful force. When a large number of planets collided together and exploded at the same time, even an immortal venerable like floating cloud wouldn't dare to underestimate it. Thousands of planets exploded in the span of 2 to 3 breaths. A large black hole appeared in the space. The cultivators on the immortal realm continent below were all looking up at the sky. All they could see was countless stars in the distant sky turning into streaks of light and colliding with a single point. Then, like fireworks, it was magnificent and magnificent. When all of the planets had exploded and the black hole had disappeared, Hu Yunzi's sorry figure was revealed. Hu Yunzi's Taoist robes were already in tatters. His neatly combed hair was also emitting thick black smoke, just like the horsetail whisk in his hand. "Old bastard, you're ruthless!" Hu Yunzi cursed loudly. At that moment, the black tortoise had already fled extremely far away. It had almost escaped the range of Hu Yunzi's divine sense. "You want to run? Not so easy." Hu Yunzi's body trembled and he returned to normal. Then, he stuck a colorful talisman on his body. His body immediately turned into a streak of light and flew away. His speed was actually much faster than before. It didn't take long for Hu Yunzi to catch up to the black tortoise. When the black tortoise saw that Hu Yunzi's speed had increased by quite a bit, it shrank its body again and increased its speed. As a result, the distance between the two of them remained the same. As for the black tortoise, it specifically headed towards places with densely packed planet. It would occasionally stop and wave its claws to summon countless planets to bombard Hu Yunzi. Hu Yunzi would block them before speeding up again. Another 2 years were wasted in this pursuit. The black tortoise once again arrived at a place with densely packed planet. However, when the black tortoise summoned countless planets, the planets that were originally rushing towards Hu Yunzi all exploded midway. Then, a colorful ribbon snaked over from nearby. In the blink of an eye, the ribbon wrapped around the black tortoise, which had shrunk significantly. Afterwards, Hu Yunzi's mountainous treasure fell from the sky and smashed into the immobilized black tortoise. The black tortoise was powerful, but as soon as the mysterious inscriptions on its shell began to circulate, it was suppressed by the light from the colorful ribbon. As a result, the mountain landed firmly on the black tortoise's body, causing it to sink abruptly. Roar! The black tortoise let out a furious roar. Afterwards, its body began to expand rapidly. In an instant, it had returned to its original size, 100,000 feet tall and over 100,000 feet long. The colorful ribbon was miraculous as well. It could actually expand along with the black tortoise's body and continue to wrap around it. Have a taste of my 6 directions god-slaying lightning. Hu Yunzi flew above the black tortoise. Afterwards, he used a profound movement technique as he silently chanted an incantation. In the empty starry sky, an extremely vast dark cloud gradually appeared. Purplish-gold lightning flashed with a shocking radiance. Boom! A bolt of purplish-gold lightning fell. The black tortoise had just unleashed an orange-yellow barrier of light, but before the lightning could strike it, it was already shattered by the light from the colorful ribbon. The purplish-gold lightning struck the black tortoise without any obstruction, causing the mysterious inscriptions on its shell to suddenly halt. The black tortoise's body fell several 100,000 feet once more. It wanted to swing its 4 claws, but the irresistible force from the colorful ribbon made it immobile. Boom! 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 Bolts after bolts of purple-gold divine lightning struck down, landing solidly on the black tortoise's shell. The black tortoise was in a completely passive situation, but its defense was shockingly strong. Even if it was struck by the divine lightning, it was not injured at all. Fairy Lan Yao, use your world-piercing divine needle to pierce through this old tortoise's shell. Hu Yunzi had been bombarding the 6 directions god-slaying lightning for a long time. Although he seemed to have the upper hand, he was still unable to break through the black tortoise's shell. Thus, he shouted into the nearby void. In the direction of Hu Yunzi's shout, a fairy in a fluttering colorful dress suddenly appeared. At this moment, the colorful ribbon that was tightly wrapped around the black tortoise had extended from this fairy's sleeve. This fairy's cheeks were pretty, and her lips were bright red. Her phoenix eyes were very spirited, and they seemed a little long and narrow like blades. She appeared with a smile, giving off a mischievous and childish feeling. Haha, old Taoist Hu Yunzi, this black tortoise's shell is too hard. It's comparable to a divine artifact. My world-piercing divine needle probably won't be able to do anything to it. Fairy Lan Yao replied with a smile. However, she gently waved her sleeve, and a long needle that constantly flowed with divine light appeared above her head. If we force it into a corner and it activates its innate ability, the 2 of us will have a hard time. Fairy Lan Yao took out the world-piercing divine needle, but she seemed a little hesitant. Fairy, can't you see that this old tortoise has a divine artifact? Hu Yunzi asked again. Fairy Lan Yao was first deliberately taken aback, then she said in a strange tone, It really does have a divine artifact. It seems to be a space-type divine abode. Let's join forces and take it. How about that? Hu Yunzi suggested. Then after we take it, who will we give it to? Fairy Lan Yao seemed to be interested. Before Hu Yunzi could reply, the black tortoise seemed to no longer want to be in a passive position. It also seemed to realize that the situation was extremely unfavorable for it. Its aura wildly rose, and waves of orange-yellow light uncontrollably spread out. Not good. It's about to activate its innate ability, Hu Yunzi said nervously. If we join forces, even if it activates its innate ability, what can it do? It's not a super divine beast, Lan Yao said unconcernedly. Hearing Fairy Lan Yao say this, Hu Yunzi forced himself to calm down. He thought to himself, we're both paragons and we both have divine artifacts. There's indeed no need to fear the innate ability of a high-tier divine beast. As long as we block its innate ability, it will be even less of a match for us in its weakened state. At that time, what we'll obtain won't just be the divine abode, Hu Yunzi said with a bit of fanaticism. Old Taoist Hu Yunzi, you're already a paragon-level expert. You're only a step away from ascending to the divine realm. How can you still be so greedy? Fairy Lan Yao said with a shake of her head. Hu Yunzi's face reddened. He thought to himself that he had lost his composure. The black tortoise activated its innate ability, and it only took a few breaths of time to gather all the earth element energy in the surrounding space around it. Then, the earth element energy condensed into solid walls, surrounding Hu Yunzi and Fairy Lan Yao from all directions. Imprisoning ability? Fairy Lan Yao frowned. High-tier divine beasts were different from super-divine beasts. Every super-divine beast only had a specific innate ability, such as the five-clawed golden dragon's ability to seal space, or the fire phoenix's ability to burn the heavens. However, the innate abilities of high-tier divine beasts were often not specific. Instead, they were determined by the characteristics of their cultivation. Ordinary black tortoises' innate abilities relied on their powerful defenses to protect themselves. It was extremely rare to see an innate ability used to trap an opponent. As soon as the solid walls formed, they whistled over. Before the two celestial sovereigns could react, they had already completely sealed off their surroundings. Don't worry. It's just activated its innate ability, so it must be extremely weak. Even if it traps us for a while, it won't be able to escape. Chapter 360. Even the world-piercing divine needle, which was extremely famous in the immortal realm, could only leave behind a fingernail-sized dent when it struck the wall. Although Hu Yunzi and Blue Jade were trapped, they were constantly attacking the wall together. Sooner or later, they would be able to break out. And before they could break out, the Xuanwu tortoise would be able to escape. The Xuanwu tortoise naturally knew that the two of them were sovereigns. It also knew that its attacks were slightly inferior and could not beat the two of them. Moreover, if they worked together, they would be able to completely suppress it. Thus, it did not dawdle and used its innate ability. But just as Fairy Blue Jade said, after using its innate ability, the Xuanwu tortoise was extremely weak. Trapping two immortal sovereigns with high-quality divine artifacts had exhausted all of its power and energy. Even if there was no one stopping it, it would not be able to escape quickly. The Xuanwu tortoise continued to shrink its body and gradually increased its speed. However, compared to its previous speed, it was now like a turtle crawling. The walls had only trapped the two immortal sovereigns for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Although the Xuanwu tortoise had slowed down, it had already escaped the range of their divine senses. It can't escape too far right now. Let's split up and chase it, Fairy Blue Jade said as she chased in a certain direction. AI, we can only rely on luck. Hu Yunzi sighed helplessly and chased in another direction. An hour later, Fairy Blue Jade caught up to the Xuanwu tortoise. It was clear that she was chasing in the right direction, while Hu Yunzi was chasing in the wrong direction. Big Turtle, leave that divine palace behind and I can let you go, Fairy Blue Jade said with a sweet smile as she blocked the path. The Xuanwu tortoise hesitated for a moment before waving its claws. The divine palace flew toward Fairy Blue Jade. Fairy Blue Jade extended her arm and a colorful ribbon wrapped around the divine palace. Then, she moved out of the way. Although the black turtle tortoise was weak, its impenetrable defense was still present. It was impossible for Fairy Blue Jade to kill it with her own strength. She did not want to wait for Yunzi to arrive, so she could only let the black turtle tortoise go. The black tortoise was still a supreme level expert. If Fairy Blue Jade were to go all out, even if she could win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. The spatial barrier between the immortal and demon realms was about to crack. She needed to maintain her peak condition. Of course, another point was that Fairy Blue Jade was not a greedy person, nor was she a ruthless person. After handing over the god's abode, the black tortoise pretended to fly away. But just as its giant body moved to Fairy Blue Jade's side, it suddenly struck out at her. Fairy Lan Yao thought that the big turtle was already weak, and it had obediently offered up its divine palace. It must have only wanted to save its own life and wouldn't dare to fight to the death with her. However, she never thought that the big turtle would suddenly attack. Feeling the terrifying power in the palm, she was shocked. She wrapped the ribbon around her divine palace and charged forward. The ribbon wrapped around the black tortoise's claw, but then the black tortoise's other claw slammed toward Fairy Blue Jade. Fairy Blue Jade shot out the world-piercing divine needle, wanting to force the black tortoise's claw back. However, the black tortoise relied on its thick skin and thick flesh to not retract its claw. Even though the world-piercing divine needle had pierced its flesh, its claw still slammed into Fairy Blue Jade's head. The black tortoise's strength was not something that human cultivators of the same generation could compare with. Its claw slammed down like a divine mountain, and it carried with it a terrifying spatial fluctuation. Even though Fairy Blue Jade released her own aura to block it, she was still struck until she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body continued to fall. The seemingly honest black tortoise was actually such a scheming person. "Big turtle, I'll rip off your turtle shell." Fairy Blue Jade was furious. Her body fell, and after neutralizing the power of the palm, she charged forward again. The ribbon and the world-piercing divine needle attacked the black tortoise at the same time. The black tortoise's body glowed with yellow light. It quickly waved its claws and chanted an incantation. As it waved its claws, the stars turned into streams of light and flew over. As it chanted the incantation, the space around it gradually became heavier. Fairy Blue Jade was enraged, and the black tortoise seemed to want to go all out. The two paragons battled in the air, and their auras surged for millions of miles. The divine palace was not the focus at this time. It was swept away by the auras of the two paragons. Xiaolingyu was in the divine dwellings, closely watching the outside. When the divine dwellings were far away from the battlefield, and the two venerables were locked in battle, he decisively left the divine dwellings, and a pair of silver wings appeared on his back. The silver wings flapped, and Xiaolingyu turned into a beam of silver light, flying into the depths of the Milky Way. Fairy Blue Jade and the black tortoise's attention were all focused on their opponents. They were incomparably furious, so they didn't pay attention to where the divine palace went. Even if they did, they were too focused on attacking or blocking, so they couldn't pay attention to it. While escaping at full speed, Xiaolingyu's heart was still beating with fear. The spells of paragons were not something he could compare to. If Yunzi hadn't appeared in time, he might have been forced out of the divine palace by the black tortoise's spell. Xiaolingyu knew that the range of a paragon's divine sense was extremely large, so he flew at full speed, not daring to stop at all. He prayed that the battle between the two paragons would not end too soon. He flew at full speed for 2 years, and no one caught up. Xiaolingyu felt a bit more relaxed. But now he was in the starry sky of the celestial realm, and he didn't have the speed of a paragon's. If he wanted to go to the next continent of the celestial realm, he didn't know how long he would have to wait. That black tortoise took 2 years to fly from the walking pill continent to another continent. Its speed is more than 10,000 times faster than mine. Could it be that I have to use tens of thousands of years to land on another continent of the immortal realm? Looking at the vast starry sky, Xiaolingyu's face was gloomy. After thinking for a bit, he continued to fly at full speed. Paragons were too fast, and their divine sense covered an extremely large area. Xiaolingyu had flown at full speed for 2 years, but they could fly over in a few hours. He didn't dare to be too confident in his luck. As he flew, Xiaolingyu continued to refine the divine palace. He felt that if he wanted to reach the next continent of the celestial realm as soon as possible, he had to rely on this divine palace. Xiaolingyu had some understanding of the divine palace. He knew that the divine palace could also fly, and it was extremely fast. The battle between Fairy Blue Jade and the Black Tortoise had indeed ended. Neither of them could do anything to the other. In the end, they both gave up because they had used up too much energy. Although the Black Tortoise had used its innate ability, it had the characteristics of all tortoise-like monsters. It had great endurance, and its energy reserves were very abundant. In particular, the life essence it contained was something that no other race could compare to. It didn't hesitate to use its life essence to fight. It could make up for the huge consumption of its innate ability. This was why the Black Tortoise dared to fight Fairy Blue Jade. After the battle, the Black Tortoise, Fairy Blue Jade, and Hu Yunzi all searched the vast starry sky for the divine palace. They didn't give up. The 3 paragons believed that as long as the divine palace wasn't controlled by another paragons, it would be impossible for it to escape or hide. Xiaolingyu continued to refine the divine palace. Fortunately, his current primal chaos true fire was already comparable to the divine flame after absorbing the devil flames in the independent space. Furthermore, his cultivation was also the primal chaos force, which was of a higher level than the immortal spirit force, so he was able to refine the divine palace, and his speed was not very slow. If it was an ordinary cultivator below the immortal emperor realm, they wouldn't be able to hide in the divine palace even after thousands of years. However, Xiaolingyu was able to do this very quickly. It was because he could hide in the divine palace that Xiaolingyu was able to hide in the divine palace even though the starry sky of the immortal realm was very dangerous. As time passed, Xiaolingyu's refinement of the divine palace became more and more profound. The abilities he could use the divine palace also gradually increased. After 100 years, Xiaolingyu grasped the ability of the divine palace to fly. However, the divine palace could fly, but it required enough energy to support it. Moreover, it consumed a lot of energy. Fortunately, the divine palace was of a very high level and could supply any kind of energy. Xiaolingyu also had a lot of demonic crystals, so it wasn't a problem for him to let the divine palace fly for a period of time. Xiaolingyu was on a planet. With a thought, the divine palace flew out of his dantian and his figure suddenly disappeared. Inside his divine dwellings, Xiaolingyu took out piles of demonic crystals, formed hand seals, and chanted an incantation. The demonic spiritual power in the piles of demonic crystals frantically gushed out, and then was absorbed by his divine dwellings. After absorbing the energy, the divine palace began to tremble and then slowly moved into the sky. After a few moments, the divine palace turned into a ray of colorful light and flew into the vast starry sky. Its speed was much faster than the Black Tortoise. What made Xiaolingyu's heart ache was that the demonic crystals he wanted to use to increase his cultivation were rapidly turning into ashes. Even though he had successfully escaped danger this time, he had paid a great price. Half a year passed like this. After consuming more than 1,000,000 demonic crystals, Xiaolingyu finally saw a continent floating in the starry sky of the immortal realm. Phew! Although the consumption is great, it's worth it to be able to keep my life. In front of this continent, Xiaolingyu put away the divine palace and let out a long breath of turbid air. Then, he leaped and flew toward the continent. This continent of the immortal realm was extremely vast. It took Xiaolingyu more than half a year to see a city. He landed, but did not enter the city. Instead, he stopped a cultivator and asked where the teleportation array to this continent was. After getting the answer, he had no choice but to enter the Divine Palace again and continue to let the Divine Palace fly because the teleportation array was too far away. At his speed, it would take him at least a few decades to reach it. He was anxious to find Anya and completely get rid of the three supremacies. He couldn't wait that long. After reaching the teleportation array, Xiaolingyu continuously teleported more than 10 times. He was already far away from the Zhuan continent before he dared to stop. Chapter 361. He could not go back to the Duan continent. Even though the three supremacy-level experts were most likely not on the Duan continent, many immortal emperors would definitely go there to check. Xiaolingyu needed to find another famous continent like the Duan continent because the ordinary mercenaries on the immortal world continents would not accept his mission. He could only continue to teleport. Fortunately, the immortal world was relatively peaceful, and the immortals were relatively kinder. Xiaolingyu did not encounter any trouble along the way. It took nearly 100 years for Xiaolingyu to arrive at another immortal world continent that was comparable to the Duan continent. This continent was called the East Imperial Continent. It was said that in ancient times, there was an expert known as the East Imperial Continent who cultivated on this continent. Now, that expert was no longer on this continent. East Imperial Continent? Could it be the East Imperial Continent's Tai? With this question in mind, Xiaolingyu walked into the East Imperial Continent and spent half a day walking to the center of the city. In the center of the city, in front of the plaza in front of the city lord residence, there was a giant statue that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and thousands of feet wide. This statue had the head of a human but the body of a bird. There was also a big bell in front of it. Human head, bird body, big bell. It is indeed the East Imperial Continent's Tai, an expert from Earth. Xiaolingyu stared at this statue and looked at it carefully for a long time. He was somewhat excited. Since he started cultivating, he had heard many stories about the experts from Earth. This was the first time he had come into contact with the experts from Earth, even though it was just a statue. Beside this statue, there were countless immortals looking at it. Everyone had a respectful expression, full of respect for the ancient experts. Xiaolingyu's understanding of Earth's ancient powerhouses was limited to some books and novels on Earth. Those records might not be true, and they were very simple. He hoped that he would have the opportunity to meet with Earth's ancient powerhouses and listen to what they had to say. After looking at the statue for a while, Xiaolingyu walked into the mercenary division building opposite the city lord residence. What made Xiaolingyu a little depressed was that the East Imperial Continent's mercenary branch didn't have any sand crystal collecting missions. He had no choice but to leave the branch building and find a large-scale material store on the other side of the plaza. In order not to attract attention, Xiaolingyu first sold 50 sand crystals and then went to look for the next shop. The reward of collecting sand crystals in the material store was slightly lower than the reward of the mercenary mission. It was about 18,000 immortal crystals per piece. Xiaolingyu went to 6 stores and got more than 5 million immortal crystals. However, what Xiaolingyu didn't expect was that when he arrived at the second floor of the mercenary division, he also met an old man in a side room. However, this old man asked him for 8 million immortal crystals before he was willing to help him issue this mission. Xiaolingyu knew that there was no point in reasoning with them, so she could only go to the material store to sell sand crystals again. Fortunately, Xiaolingyu had a lot of sand crystals, and he didn't use many of them when he was cultivating. Otherwise, if the mercenary suddenly increased the reward, he would have to think about how to collect more immortal crystals. After preparing 8 million immortal crystals, he went to the side room on the second floor of the mercenary division again. The old man accepted the immortal crystals with a smile and then gave Xiaolingyu a jade token. With this jade token, You can check whether the mission has been completed in any of the Immortal World's continents where the mercenary division is located. As your mission involves too many areas, we can't determine your location at all times. Therefore, we can't notify you after the mission is completed. We can only rely on you to go to the mercenary division at any time to check. The old man didn't forget to remind him. How long will it take for you to issue this mission to all the continents in the Immortal World? Xiaoling Yu asked. Haha, it won't take long. Within 10,000 years, this mission will be issued to all the places where the mercenary division is located, the old man said with a smile. 10,000 years? Xiaoling Yu frowned slightly. He was obviously a little dissatisfied. Your mission will be issued in the East Imperial Continent. We have to hand it over to the headquarters first. Then, the headquarters will use various channels to spread it throughout the Immortal World as soon as possible. However, the Immortal World is vast and boundless. There are countless continents. Even our mercenary division can't spread a message throughout the Immortal World in a few years or decades, the old man explained calmly. Xiaoling Yu nodded in understanding. Then, he kept the jade token and left the mercenary division. In fact, Xiaoling Yu knew in his heart that 10,000 years was not a long time for the cultivators in the Immortal World. In fact, it was a relatively short period of time. It was indeed commendable to distribute this mission to the Immortal World within 10,000 years. If they were lucky, someone might have already found Anya and completed the mission before the mission was completely distributed throughout the Immortal World. If they were unlucky, even if the mercenary division distributed the mission in an instant, no one would be able to find Anya for 10,000 years or even tens of thousands of years. The mercenary division had already begun to distribute the mission. Xiaoling Yu had to contact the people from the inquiry organization and ask them to also search for Anya in the Immortal World. Only by doing this would they be able to find Anya in the shortest time possible. Only then could he be at ease. However, although the inquiry organization was quite powerful and spread throughout the Immortal World, they did not have a shop front or a signboard. It was a little difficult to find them. What was certain was that there must be people from the inquiry organization on the East Imperial Continent. It could even be said that there were people from the inquiry organization in the East Imperial City. Therefore, Xiaoling Yu did not need to go to other continents. He wandered around the East Imperial City every day for a period of time. It was not until 2 months later that he heard in a restaurant that it was actually very simple to find people from the inquiry organization. All he needed to do was to set up a sign in a crowded place with the words, "Help," written on it, and people from the inquiry organization would take the initiative to come to him. Although Xiaoling Yu was skeptical about this, he still did as he was told. He set up a wooden sign in the square in front of the city lord mansion. To his surprise, it was only half a day later, and someone really came to him. A cultivator who looked a little thin sent a voice transmission to Xiaoling Yu and asked, "Sir, what can I do for you?" Xiaoling Yu glanced at the other party and found that he was just a golden immortal of the great all-embracing heaven, equivalent to a true devil, but his expression was calm and he seemed to think highly of himself. He seemed to have a strong background. Xiaoling Yu replied, "I'm looking for a person in the entire immortal realm." When the thin cultivator heard this, he frowned slightly and said, "This price is very high. No matter how high it is, there should be a price, right?" Xiaoling Yu replied, "I can't make this decision. I have to ask first," the thin cultivator said. "I'll wait here, but don't make me wait too long," Xiaoling Yu replied indifferently. Indeed, the thin cultivator didn't make Xiaoling Yu wait too long. He left for less than an hour, then turned back and said, "You need at least 5 million immortal crystals." Xiaoling Yu pretended to ponder for a while, as if he was very hesitant. Then, as if he had made a big decision, he said, 5 million it is. As long as you can find the person, the immortal crystals won't be a problem." The thin cultivator nodded and said, You have to pay 2 million immortal crystals as a deposit first. You can pay us the remaining 3 million after you find the person. Xiao Lingyu touched his chin and replied, "No problem. Then come with me." The thin cultivator waved his hand and turned to lead the way. "Wait first. How can I be sure who you are and whether or not you have the ability to complete the task?" "I don't have much time to waste," Xiao Lingyu said very cautiously. "I'm a person who knows how to gather information. If you believe me, then come. If you don't, then leave," the thin cultivator said very firmly. After saying this, he turned and left. Xiao Lingyu thought about it for a while, but still followed the thin cultivator and left the square. They didn't leave the city. The thin cultivator brought Xiao Lingyu to an ordinary-looking shop, and then the two of them entered the shop together. This was a small material shop. The shop only had 2 floors, and the hall on the first floor was less than 30 square meters. At this time, there were no customers in the shop. There was only an old man who seemed to be the shopkeeper. He was lying on the counter as if he was sleeping. When he heard movement in the shop, he slowly raised his head and glanced. When he saw the thin cultivator, he actually lay on the counter again. The thin cultivator shook his head and smiled. Then, he said to Xiao Lingyu, "Let's go upstairs." After all, this was the East Imperial Kingdom. Xiao Lingyu felt that if this guy was deceiving him and wanted to harm him in this shop, it wouldn't be easy to make him stay. Even if there were experts in the shop, he could hide in his spiritual abode and escape. Therefore, he followed without hesitation. There was only one room on the second floor. At this time, there was only a young-looking cultivator sitting on a wooden chair. This young cultivator should have known that there would be customers, so he didn't have the slightest reaction to Xiao Lingyu's arrival. Instead, he stood up with a smile and pointed to a chair. "Please sit." "Thank you." Xiao Lingyu sat down calmly. "I think you'd better prove your identity. Otherwise, I won't give you millions of immortal crystals." The young cultivator first waved the thin cultivator away. Then, he said, "Of course." Then, the young cultivator put a palm-sized gold medal on the table and motioned for Xiao Lingyu to check. Xiao Lingyu didn't stand on ceremony. He took the gold medal in his hand. It felt a little heavy. He knew that the quality of this gold medal wasn't low. After taking a closer look, he was sure that this gold medal must be made of top-grade materials. Just this gold medal alone was comparable to a top-grade immortal artifact. The front of the gold medal was engraved with the words, "Inquirer." On the back, there was a woman with the lower body of a snake and the upper body of a human. Xiao Lingyu couldn't help but exclaim, "Niuwa." When the young cultivator heard Xiao Lingyu's voice, his smiling face immediately sank. He asked, "Do you know the senior engraved on the medal?" Chapter 362. This is an ancient powerhouse. Her cultivation is extremely high. Even among the god-level powerhouses, she is considered one of the top existences, the young cultivator said with a look of reverence. The power of an ancient powerhouse is indeed something that the later generations cannot hope to match. Xiao Lingyu nodded in agreement. "I heard you say Niuwa just now. In fact, these 2 words are the honorific title of this ancient senior. However, even now, the top powerhouses of the immortal world don't know these 2 words. How did you know, fellow Taoist?" the young cultivator asked with narrowed eyes. "I saw it in an ancient book that I came across by chance." Xiao Lingyu lied. "Haha, I see." The young cultivator smiled and said casually, "I thought that fellow Taoist came from the same place as this ancient powerhouse." Xiao Lingyu's expression did not change much. She only seemed to be curious and asked, "Does fellow Taoist know where this ancient powerhouse came from?" The young cultivator said, "Of course I do. She is the founder of our inquiry organization. How can we not know the origins of our ancestor?" Xiao Lingyu continued, "The ancient book did not mention this senior's origins. I wonder if fellow Taoist can tell us a little about it?" The young cultivator tapped his finger rhythmically on the table. After a moment of silence, he said, "The ancestors' matters should not be revealed to outsiders. However, the ancestor is no longer in the immortal world. Moreover, she is a person with great magical powers. Even if some information about her is leaked, there won't be any problems. Moreover, since fellow Taoist can see the ancestor in the ancient book, I think you are fated to meet her. The ancestor came from Earth." Xiaolingyu's expression was still very calm. She said, "I heard in the cultivation world that many powerful people in ancient times came from Earth." The young cultivator nodded and asked, "Fellow Taoist, where did you come from?" Xiaolingyu had already expected the other party to ask, so she replied without any hesitation, "A continent that is not very famous in the cultivation world." This answer was too general. It was equivalent to not answering at all. The young cultivator wasn't dissatisfied with this answer and immediately said, "Has Your Excellency confirmed my identity?" Xiaolingyu straightforwardly threw a storage pouch on the table and said, "There are 2 million immortal crystals here, please check." The young cultivator looked into the storage bag with his immortal sense, then put it away and said, "Tell me the characteristics of the person you're looking for. It's best if you can show me an image." Xiaolingyu placed a jade slip on the table, just like she did in the room on the second floor of the mercenary branch. The jade slip contained the introduction of Anya and Anya's image. "Keep this jade token well. As long as we complete our mission, this jade token will shatter. Then, you can go to any of the major cities in the immortal plane to look for our spies. You'll know where to find her," the young cultivator said, placing a jade token on the table. Xiaolingyu took the jade token and carefully sensed it. He found that there was a soul imprint on it. Only then did he understand the young cultivator's meaning. After the spies completed their mission, they actually used the method of killing a person to remind Xiaolingyu that the jade token was a soul jade token. "Don't worry. He is someone who deserves to be killed. Our investigative organization has imprisoned many such fellows. It would be a pity to kill him for nothing. Thus, we decided to make use of him." The young cultivator, who had seemingly seen through Xiaolingyu's thoughts, explained. Xiaolingyu wasn't a soft-hearted person, so he naturally wouldn't think much of it. After putting away the jade token, he didn't rush to leave. Instead, he said, "Can you tell me some stories about the experts on Earth?" The young cultivator smiled and asked, "Are you very curious about this?" Xiaolingyu nodded and said, "I'm a little curious. It's mainly because I read an ancient book that described the cultivators on Earth to be very powerful. I want to know more." The young cultivator said, "If it's just out of curiosity, it's better not to know too much." Xiaolingyu frowned and didn't understand. "Why is that?" The young cultivator smiled faintly and said, "It's better for us to talk business. If you didn't call out the name of the ancestor, I wouldn't have said those things to you. Fellow Taoist, please go back. If you're fated to encounter some things, you'll naturally come across them." Xiaolingyu thought about it, but he still swallowed some of his words and went downstairs. He originally wanted to say that he was also from Earth, but he didn't have any evidence to prove it. Moreover, he wasn't sure what the young cultivator's relationship with Earth was. Thus, after much consideration, he gave up on this plan. After leaving the shop, Xiaolingyu was at a loss. The task of finding Anya had been handed over to the two major forces in the immortal world. With their help, he didn't have to worry too much about this matter. However, what should he do next? "I have to continue cultivating and prepare to break through to the 5th transformation of the 9-revolution chaos formula. The expert from the demon world, who was invincible in the 3 realms in the past, will regain his strength in 1,000,000 years. The life essence that he left in my body will also disappear along with my life essence. If I don't cultivate diligently, I'm afraid after 1,000,000 years." Thinking about this, Xiaolingyu's face became more determined. After all, this East Imperial continent was the place where the ancestors of Earth cultivated. Xiaolingyu didn't have any better place to go. Thus, he was prepared to stay here and cultivate diligently while waiting for news from the two major forces. Even if he wanted to stay, he couldn't stay in the East Imperial Continent forever. Right now, his focus was to break through to the Immortal Lord realm and help the strange cub to advance to the Monarch realm. First, he purchased a jade slip with the map of the East Imperial Continent. After checking it, Xiaolingyu left the East Imperial Continent and headed to the other nearby cities. The East Imperial Continent had a vast surface area, and it was naturally not the only city in the East Imperial Continent. In order to not attract any attention, Xiaolingyu decided to sell the remaining sand crystals in other cities and use them to exchange for a large amount of immortal crystals for him to purchase some special materials. However, the distance between the cities in the East Imperial Continent was generally very far. Xiaolingyu didn't want to use his spiritual abode on such a prosperous continent. Thus, it was inevitable that some time would be wasted. Although he was in a hurry to cultivate, Xiaolingyu didn't care about this little bit of time. After 2 years, he only had a little more than 100 sand crystals left. His storage artifact also had an additional 5 million immortal crystals. I'll go to another city. Then, I can sell all these immortal crystals. I can also go to the East Imperial Continent to start collecting some materials. With this hope, Xiaolingyu rushed to the next city at full speed. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to reach his destination in 2 days, Xiaolingyu was stopped by a group of cultivators. The leader of this group of cultivators was an early-stage immortal monarch. He first sized up Xiaolingyu and then asked coldly, "Sir, what are you trying to do by trespassing into the territory of the Nanhua Immortal Sect?" Nanhua Immortal Sect? This place is 100,000 miles away from the encampment of the Nanhua Immortal Sect. How can you say that I'm trespassing? Xiaolingyu frowned and asked. The Nanhua Immortal Sect's location was naturally marked in the Jade Slip map. Xiaolingyu wasn't an arrogant person. He wasn't someone who liked to cause trouble. Why would he trespass into the territory of an immortal sect? This route had been carefully calculated by him. Since you dare to trespass into the territory of our Nanhua Immortal Sect, why are you feigning ignorance? This place has been under our Nanhua Immortal Sect's territory for 50 years. The immortal monarch snorted coldly. Xiaolingyu knew that it was very common for a large sect to expand its territory. Therefore, he didn't dwell on this issue. Instead, he said apologetically, "I'm not a cultivator from around here. Therefore, I didn't know that your immortal sect had made great progress. Please make an exception for me. I'll leave right now." As he spoke, Xiaolingyu tactfully handed over a storage pouch. There were 1,000 immortal crystals in the storage pouch, which was not a small sum. Where do you think our Nanhua Immortal Sect is? How can you come and go as you please? What Xiaolingyu didn't expect was that the immortal monarch didn't let him go even after taking his storage pouch. Instead, he seemed to want to make things worse. "Then what do you want?" Xiaolingyu asked with narrowed eyes. "Nothing. I just want you to come with us to our sect's encampment. You can leave after you've made things clear," the immortal monarch said calmly. "What's there to talk about? Even if this is really your Nanhua Immortal Sect's territory, why didn't I see any of your people guarding the perimeter before I came in? Why did you wait until I came in and then say that I'm trespassing? You said that this is your territory. Why didn't you make a sign?" Xiaolingyu was a little angry and questioned coldly. "I advise you not to get too worked up. This is our territory. I just need to send out a signal, and immortal emperor experts will come. Then, you'll have a hard time. Why don't you come with me obediently?" The immortal monarch said with a threatening tone. The Nanhua Immortal Sect was indeed a top sect on the East Imperial Continent. There were indeed more than one immortal emperor experts in the sect. "I suspect that you're not from the Nanhua Immortal Sect. You're robbers." Xiaolingyu's aura began to rise. Since the immortal monarch threatened him, He had to let him know that he wasn't to be trifled with. What? You still want to fight? I think you're tired of living. The immortal monarch sneered and shot out a stream of light into the sky. The stream of light shot into the sky, and then suddenly exploded, like fireworks blooming. Xiaolingyu didn't think that the immortal monarch was a disciple of the Nanhua immortal sect. Therefore, he didn't hold back. The extreme speed wings appeared on his back, and he rushed forward. You want to rush out? It's not that easy. The immortal monarch shot out an immortal talisman and spat out a ray of light. Chapter 363. The flame did not pose any threat to Xiaolingyu, so it was fine for him to barge through it. However, although the silver net could not hurt him, it would be difficult for him to escape if it enveloped him. He had tried his best to keep a low profile and did not want to provoke these people. However, they were too aggressive. Xiaolingyu was a member of the demon Dao and had a strong demonic nature. How could he allow them to bully him like this? Xiaolingyu didn't rush into the flame. Instead, he paused and raised his hands, grabbing the threads of the silver net that was coming down on him. Break it! Xiaolingyu shouted as he exerted force with both hands. The net, which was a supreme-grade immortal artifact, was split into two. The group of cultivators who were blocking the way were all shocked. Xiaolingyu had been speaking humbly and acting like a weakling, but now that he was showing his power, he could actually tear apart a supreme-grade immortal artifact with his bare hands. This was completely beyond their expectations. Under the control of the immortal monarch, the flame pounced toward Xiaolingyu. Xiaolingyu snorted coldly and waved his hand to release his chaotic primordial fire. The chaotic primordial fire whizzed out with a might comparable to that of a divine fire, causing the space of the immortal world to fluctuate. In just an instant, the chaotic primordial fire extinguished the flame released by the immortal monarch. Xiaolingyu looked at the immortal monarch coldly and said, "You are courting death. Don't blame me for being ruthless." This sentence was like a judgment. Then, with a light flap of the wings of extreme speed, Xiaolingyu's body turned into a silver stream of light and instantly charged into the group of cultivators. Without using any Dharma treasures or spells, Xiaolingyu only used his fists and legs, which were wrapped in the chaotic primordial fire, to attack the cultivators. There was only one immortal monarch on the other side, and the rest were all below the immortal monarch level. How could they dodge Xiaolingyu's rapid attacks, let alone survive the attack of the chaotic primordial fire? Before the immortal monarch could react effectively, all the cultivators he brought were killed on the spot. "It's your turn now." Xiaolingyu did not dawdle at all. In a flash, she charged forward again. Although his opponent was an early-stage immortal monarch, Xiaolingyu was only half a step away from that. When he was in the spirit demon realm, he was already able to challenge early-stage immortal monarchs, and his speed wasn't any slower than early-stage immortal monarchs. Now, even if he encountered late-stage immortal monarchs, he could easily defeat them. Only then did the immortal monarch realize the seriousness of the situation. Out of fear, he first shot out a supreme-grade immortal talisman to defend himself before turning around to flee. The other party could easily tear apart a top-grade immortal artifact. That immortal monarch knew that the magic artifacts he possessed would not be able to stop the other party. Furthermore, when he saw the other party easily killing so many of his fellow sect members, he knew that he had no other choice but to flee. However, what shocked the immortal monarch even more was that the other party actually managed to forcefully withstand the attack of the top-grade immortal talisman and catch up to him. After being blasted by the supreme-grade immortal talisman, Xiaolingyu only suffered some superficial injuries. After catching up to the immortal monarch, he viciously punched out and directly smashed the other party's head. The immortal monarch's reaction wasn't slow either. He immediately let his immortal nascent soul out of his body, but Xiaolingyu's battle awareness was much higher than his. He grabbed his immortal nascent soul and sealed it. Even the immortal monarch's body was directly put into the spirit beast pouch where the strange cub was kept by Xiaolingyu. Who dares to behave atrociously in the territory of the Nan Hua immortal sect? Just as Xiaolingyu was about to leave, a slightly angry voice came from afar. Xiaolingyu glanced sideways and saw a stream of light with the aura fluctuation of an immortal emperor expert flying toward him. Just as he was about to enter his spiritual abode to escape, the intruder had already arrived in front of him and sealed off a large area with his powerful aura. The biggest difference between an immortal emperor expert and other cultivators was that they already had their own aura field. With this alone, they could force cultivators who were weaker than them to be completely passive in their field and unable to launch any effective attack. Xiaolingyu felt that his spiritual connection with the spiritual abode was still there. He could hide in the spiritual abode at any time, so he was not too nervous. However, if Xiaolingyu entered the spiritual abode now, it would be difficult for the spiritual abode to escape. Even if the intruder could not do anything to the spiritual abode, he could still trap the spiritual abode here for a while and then send a message to invite more expert. By then, Xiaolingyu would have to hide in the spiritual abode forever. With this concern, Xiaolingyu did not enter the spiritual abode, but his expression was still very calm and composed. Your Excellency is truly bold and ruthless. The intruder looked middle-aged and was rather tall. He wore a golden brocade robe and had his hands behind his back. He looked at Xiaolingyu with a gloomy expression. These people pretended to be disciples of the Nan Hua immortal sect and were robbing here. I had no choice but to kill them. I did not mean to cause trouble here, Xiaolingyu said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. They were not impostors. They were disciples of the Nan Hua immortal sect. You said that they were robbing here. It's like the guilty party accusing the victim first. The intruder sneered. They were disciples of the Nan Hua immortal sect? Haha. Xiaolingyu laughed and shook his head. I did not expect the top sects of the East Imperial Continent to behave like this. Seeing Xiaolingyu's reaction, the intruder was actually not very confident. He could not see Xiaolingyu's cultivation level. Although he felt that Xiaolingyu's cultivation level should not be very high, the battle just now was clearly a one-sided massacre, and it ended very quickly. No matter what, you have killed disciples of the Nan Hua immortal sect. You have to give us an explanation, right? The intruder narrowed his eyes and asked. At the same time, he increased the ceiling of his domain. He wanted to see if the other party had a domain to counter it. If not, the other party was below the immortal emperor realm. Explanation? If they did not stop me, how could I kill them? Although the Nan Hua immortal sect is powerful, don't piss me off. Xiaolingyu could also sense the intruder's domain. However, he knew that the domain of an immortal emperor realm expert was to use their immortal senses to forcefully fill the surrounding space with their cultivation energy. Using their cultivation energy and immortal senses to form a special wave, they could suppress the opponent's aura and immortal senses and gain absolute control. However, Xiaolingyu's cultivation energy was the chaos demonic energy, which was stronger than immortal spirit energy. Moreover, it had a demonic nature and was more resistant to immortal spirit energy and immortal senses. Therefore, even the domain of an immortal emperor realm cultivator was not very effective against him. The intruder saw that Xiaolingyu was still relaxed under the ceiling of his domain. It was as if he was not affected at all. This made him even more unsure. If you can take one blow from me, I will let you go. After speaking, the intruder did not wait for Xiaolingyu's reply. He took out an immortal sword and slashed at Xiaolingyu. As the immortal sword slashed down, it kept expanding. The sword light was sharp, and the surrounding domain quickly pressed down on Xiaolingyu. Xiaolingyu could already tell that the immortal sword was a quasi-divine weapon. It was much more powerful than a supreme-grade immortal weapon. Moreover, with the support of the domain, it was enough to hurt him. However, He did not move because he had been locked in place. There was no way for him to dodge. He suddenly raised his palm, and a gust of primordial fire gushed out. The immortal sword was only a quasi-divine weapon, but the primordial fire had the power of a divine fire. There was a fundamental difference in quality between the two weapons. However, the immortal sword was a material object and extremely sharp. Although it could not compare to the primordial fire, it could still penetrate it and continue to fall on Xiaolingyu's head. However, its power was greatly weakened. Xiaolingyu did not retract his palm. However, his palm suddenly turned into a dragon claw covered in scales. Clang! The immortal sword slashed at the dragon claw. However, there was a sharp sound of metal clashing with stone, and sparks flew. Xiaolingyu's dragon claw was also a quasi-divine weapon. Naturally, it was not afraid of the opponent's immortal sword. The dragon claw did not let go of the immortal sword. Instead, it grabbed it. At Xiaolingyu's shout, the primordial fire completely enveloped the immortal sword and spread along the immortal sword toward the attacker's body. When Xiaolingyu was in the spirit demon realm, he was already as powerful as any immortal monarch. Now, his strength was comparable to an early-stage immortal emperor. Even if he grabbed the immortal sword, it would be difficult for the attacker to pull it back in an instant. Seeing the primordial fire burning toward him, and his immortal sword trembling under the primordial fire, the attacker knew that the primordial fire was extraordinary. It was enough to seriously injure him. Therefore, he gave up the immortal sword and retreated. Xiaolingyu still did not move. He faced the attacker and smiled disdainfully. He did not return the immortal sword. Instead, he continued to burn it with the primordial fire. What surprised the newcomer was that his immortal sword, which he had obtained with great difficulty and had the quality of a quasi-divine artifact, was gradually melting under the burning of the other party's true fire. To be able to melt a quasi-divine weapon so easily, the fire must be a godly fire. His opponent was an expert with a godly fire. Moreover, his opponent's arm suddenly turned into a dragon claw. With the dragon claw, he took the quasi-divine weapon's attack head-on. While the attacker lamented over his immortal sword, he was so shocked that he forgot to attack again. Xiaolingyu was really angry. Therefore, he no longer thought about keeping a low profile. He also did not think that the Nanhua immortal sect was an existence that he could not afford to offend. At most, he would hide in the immortal palace. Even a supremacy expert could not do anything to the immortal palace. So what if the Nanhua immortal sect did not have a supremacy? Even if I have to hide in the immortal palace for thousands of years, I will teach these guys a lesson. Under the wanton burning of the primordial fire, the immortal sword turned into liquid under the gaze of its owner. Xiaolingyu waved his hand lightly, and the liquid splashed out. Does this count as taking one of your attacks? Do you want to do it again? Xiaolingyu asked with a smile. There were people who bullied the weak and feared the strong in the demon world. There were also such cultivators in the immortal world. Xiaolingyu did not want to cause trouble earlier. Even an early-stage immortal monarch dared to attack him. Now that he was facing the immortal emperor with an unyielding attitude, the immortal emperor was a little hesitant. Haha! Fellow Taoist, you have opened my eyes. Chapter 364. Xiaolingyu knew that more experts were coming, but he wasn't surprised. This place wasn't far from the Nanhua immortal sect's encampment. A fight here would naturally alert the experts of the Nanhua immortal sect. Since an immortal emperor came, there would definitely be more. In fact, although Xiaolingyu seemed to be showing off his power and wasn't afraid of immortal emperors, he was still no match for them. However, it wouldn't be easy for an immortal emperor to take him down. It was dangerous enough to face one immortal emperor, let alone one more. Looking towards the source of the voice, an elder in a white robe was walking in the void. The old man seemed to be walking slowly, but with every step he took, he would cross thousands of feet. In just a few moments, he was right in front of them. "Greetings, Senior Brother Sect Master." The immortal Emperor cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. "I know what happened here. Junior Brother Zhua, you can go back. Leave this to me." The elder waved his hand and said. The immortal Emperor, whose immortal sword was destroyed by Xiao Lingyu, was very obedient. Without saying anything, he turned and flew away. "Taoist friend, you have a powerful quintessential fire. May I know where you are cultivating?" The elder asked politely. On the East Imperial Continent, there weren't many cultivators who could make the sect master of the Nanhua Immortal Sect act so politely. Since the sect master was smiling, Xiao Lingyu naturally wouldn't put on airs. He didn't have the right to do so. He just said calmly, "I don't belong to any sect. I'm just an itinerant cultivator. I came to the East Imperial Continent from another continent to travel." Hearing this, the old man's eyes, which were already as bright as stars, shone even brighter than before. He still said politely, "Fellow Taoist, you're a guest from afar. Since you're already beside the Nanhua Immortal Sect, I wonder if you can come with me for a moment?" Xiao Lingyu frowned slightly and said directly, "Taoist friend, if you have any thoughts, please tell me. It's boring to beat around the bush." The old man shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, please don't misunderstand. I invited fellow Taoist to the Celestial Gate not because I wanted to incite the Celestial Gate's disciples to gang up on you. I just felt that we were fated to meet and wanted to chat a little." Xiao Lingyu, on the other hand, obviously didn't believe him. "First, I killed your Nanhua Immortal Sect's disciple, and then I destroyed your junior brother's immortal sword. Now, you're inviting me to your sect, and you're saying that you don't have any ulterior motives?" The elder said, "If I had any ulterior motives, I wouldn't be wasting my time. Taoist friend, do you think that the Nanhua Immortal Sects can't do anything to you? If he didn't have a divine Abu, he would have been killed. If he didn't have a divine's divine palace. Without a Lingyu Ti, if he didn't have a divine sect, he would, if he didn't have a S2 SS divine sects, the sect. TSS sect. SSS right this A's? S. Taoist friend, you still don't trust me." The elder sighed. "Taoist friend, you said you're a rogue cultivator and don't belong to any sect. So, I'm interested in taking you in. What do you think? Just now, I killed your disciples and one of them was an immortal monarch." Xiao Lingyu didn't deny it. Our Nanhua Immortal School can still afford such a small loss. If Tao friend is willing to join us, our Nanhua Immortal School wouldn't suffer any losses from the previous battle. Instead, we would earn quite a bit." The old man was very generous and smiled sincerely. However, Xiao Lingyu felt a little uncomfortable that he didn't care about the lives of his disciples. But Xiao Lingyu, who came from the devil world, knew very well that no matter where, the rights of the weak weren't valued. This included their lives. "If I refuse to join, I'm afraid you won't let me leave so easily, right?" Xiao Lingyu thought about it and asked directly. "I believe that you'll make a wise choice. Although our Nanhua Immortal Sect isn't one of the top clans in the immortal world, it's still one of the top clans in the East Imperial Continent. Even in the entire immortal world, there aren't many who can make us fear," the elder said confidently. "As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Even the sect master has invited me. If I refuse, I'll be unappreciative. To be honest, I've been wanting to find a place to belong to and a sect to rely on. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find an opportunity. This time, my opportunity has come." Xiao Lingyu seemed to hesitate for a moment. Then, he sighed. "Haha, great." The elder laughed. "However, I've always been a lone cultivator and am used to being alone. After I join the Nanhua Immortal Sect, I hope that the sect master can make an exception and not impose too many restrictions on me," Xiao Lingyu added. Xiao Lingyu could guess that the reason why the old man invited him like this was probably because of his amazing performance in the battle with the immortal emperor. Perhaps the old man felt that the power of his chaotic truefire was too strong. Regardless, he could join the Nanhua Immortal School, but he definitely didn't want to be an ordinary disciple. Of course. Not to mention you, even the ordinary disciples of the Nanhua Immortal Sect don't face many restrictions. However, since you've decided to join the Nanhua Immortal Sect, there are some basic rules that you have to follow, the elder nodded and said. After the discussion, Xiao Lingyu swore an oath that he wouldn't betray the sect for no reason. Then, he followed the elder to the encampment of the Nanhua Immortal Sect. The elder's name was Qing Pingzi. He was the sect master of the Nanhua Immortal Sect and was a late-stage immortal emperor. He had just come out of seclusion and sensed the commotion, so he came over to take a look. Sect Master Senior Brother, why are the disciples of the Nanhua Immortal Sect stopping passers-by near the sect? Xiao Lingyu asked curiously as he followed the elder. Junior Brother Xiao, now that you're one of us, I'll tell you the truth. We're actually arresting people, Qing Pingzi said. Arresting people? Why? Xiao Lingyu was puzzled. Arresting people should only happen in the mortal world. They were arresting people to replenish the army. Junior Brother Xiao should know that a crack is about to appear in the space barrier between the immortal world and the devil world. Within 1,000,000 years, a great war will break out between the two worlds. The cultivators of the devil world are brave and aggressive, and the immortals don't like to fight. Therefore, every time there is a war between the two worlds, the immortal world will be at a disadvantage. Even during the last war, the army of the devil world invaded the subduing demon continent, causing the immortal world to suffer huge losses. Therefore, this time, several immortal venerables have decided that all the forces in the immortal world, especially the big forces, must contribute. So we're going to make up for the losses. Qing Pingzi sighed and said, You know that the war between the two worlds is huge and extremely dangerous. Even Emperor Realm experts may die on the spot, let alone ordinary cultivators. No matter how powerful your Dharma treasure is or how exquisite your Dharma spell is, it's not worth mentioning in front of countless enemies. Xiao Lingyu sighed inwardly. No wonder the group of Nanhua Immortal Sect disciples insisted on arresting him after taking his immortal crystals. They probably had a mission. Arresting people didn't exist in the demon world. The cultivators of the demon world were warlike to begin with. In such a war that only happened once in 1,000,000,000 years, they were all full of energy. Fearing that they wouldn't be able to participate in the war, they took the initiative to charge into the battlefield. There was a consensus in the demon world that the battlefield was the best place to improve one's strength and realm. But it was different for the immortals. They didn't want to face such a dangerous battle easily. However, the war between the two worlds was inevitable unless the immortal world was willing to be slaughtered by the demon world. Ordinary immortals didn't want to fight, so the immortal sovereigns had to force the first-rate or second-rate forces to participate in the war. They had no choice but to limit the number of participants. It was no wonder that the immortal world suffered losses every time it fought with the devil world. Everyone braced themselves and went to the battlefield. Naturally, they wouldn't go all out. Once they encountered a relatively powerful attack, they probably wouldn't be able to hold on for a short while before they were utterly defeated. The headquarters of the Nanhua Immortal Sect was built on top of a high mountain in a mountain range. The mountain was tens of thousands of feet tall and very huge. The top of the mountain was covered by white clouds. Following Qing Pingzi to the top of the mountain, he saw a crater-like basin above the layers of clouds. This was the top of the mountain and also the headquarters of the Nanhua Immortal Sect. The top of the mountain was round, and it looked more like a huge valley. Looking from afar, it was filled with rolling white mist, and many pavilions could be vaguely seen. There were also red-crowned cranes and elks, and there were also numerous ancient trees with luxuriant foliage, as well as countless immortal flowers and herbs. The headquarter of the Nanhua Immortal Sect was the closest to the immortal realm that Xiaolingyu imagined when he was on Earth. Qing Pingzi didn't directly enter the headquarter of the headquarter. Instead, he landed on a stone staircase outside the headquarter and walked up the staircase. At the end of the staircase was a stone door. 2 stone lion and tiger statues were lying on both sides of the door. The stone gate was 500 feet tall and 600 feet wide. It was made of pure white jade, and there were 2 divine dragons engraved on the lintel of the gate. The dragon heads were facing the ink-colored words, Southern Flower Immortal School. The 2 divine dragons on the lintel and the 2 stone statues below were vivid and lifelike. If one didn't look closely, one would think that they were alive. There were no disciples guarding the door, so the 2 easily entered the headquarter. After passing through a passageway that looked like a crack in the mountain, they finally arrived at the headquarter. What made Xiaolingyu very surprised was that, outside the mountain gate, he didn't feel anything strange. However, once he entered, there was immediately a pure and dense immortal spirit energy that assaulted his face, causing him, a cultivator of the demonic Tao, to frown. From the headquarter to where Xiaolingyu was, there was no obstruction at all. Why didn't the immortal spiritual energy leak out? There must be a trap, but Xiaolingyu's cultivation was too low to sense it. Chapter 365. Walking in the Nanhua Immortal Sect Station, one would never imagine that this was the top of a mountain. White cranes were playing in the water, immortal deer were eating duckweed, and fairies with long sleeves were chasing each other. Such tranquility and beauty could never be found in the demon realm. If I can really cultivate and live here, it would be a wonderful thing, Xiaolingyu thought to himself. Under Qing Pingzi's lead, Xiaolingyu came to the door of the pavilion in the deepest part of the station. This pavilion only had 2 floors, and there were no other buildings around it. There was not even a wall, only immortal trees and flowers that could be vaguely seen in the clouds. This used to be the residence of one of my junior brothers, but he has passed away, and this place has been vacant for many years. Junior brother Xiao, since you just arrived, you don't have a good place to stay, so you can stay here for now. As Qing Pingzi spoke, he opened the door of the attic and invited Xiaolingyu in. The first floor was not big, less than 30 square meters. The decorations were simple, but it was clean and comfortable. There were 2 wooden chairs on both sides, and a small wooden table in the middle. There were landscape paintings on the walls, and there were only 4 words in the main hall: Heaven rewards the diligent. My junior brother didn't like luxuries, and he was indifferent to worldly possessions. He only focused on cultivation. He used to be the strongest in my generation, but Qing Pingzi stopped talking and pondered for a moment. Then he said, "This will be your cultivation place from now on. If there's a chance, I'll introduce you to other disciples. You can also walk around the sect more." After that, Qing Pingzi left behind a jade slip and left. Xiaolingyu immersed his mind into the jade slip, and it took 15 minutes before he came back to his senses. There were a lot of things recorded in the jade slip. There were the rules of the Nanhua Immortal Sect, the history, the introduction of the sect masters and special people, and the description of the various businesses of the Nanhua Immortal Sect. It was almost everything and was very detailed. Xiaolingyu already had a better understanding of the Nanhua Immortal Sect after reading it once. The Nanhua Immortal Sect had a long history and a rich foundation. It had existed for tens of billions of years and had once produced immortal venerables. Now there were more than 200,000 disciples in the sect. There were close to 50 immortal emperors and thousands of immortal monarchs. Just like many other major sects in the immortal world, the Nanhua Immortal Sect was not only one of the top sects in the East Imperial Continent, but they also controlled almost 1/3 of the territories and major cities on the East Imperial Continent. They also sent out more than half of their inner sect disciples, who were immortal monarchs, to control many major cities on the continent. With such a huge force and so many experts and elite disciples, the Nan Hua Immortal Sect naturally had many ways to earn immortal stones. In this aspect, the immortal world was actually similar to the devil world. Except for some mines that contained large amounts of immortal crystals, the large factions would not mine immortal stones to maintain the sect's livelihood. Whether it was controlling the entrance fees, collecting rent, or setting up shops, it would bring them an endless amount of immortal stones every year. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the financial power and influence of large sects would become stronger and stronger. Because with enough strength, it would not be a problem to recruit experts. And with experts, others would be afraid of you and would not dare to compete with you. In the history of the Nan Hua Immortal Sect, the most famous person was naturally the founder of the sect, Nan Hua the Enlightened Being. Compared to many ancient experts, Nan Hua the Enlightened Being might not be much. However, according to the introduction in this jade slip, Nan Hua the Enlightened Being was definitely one of the top experts in the three realms. According to the records, when Nan Hua the Enlightened Being was in the Immortal Emperor realm, he once severely injured an immortal supremacy. When Nan Hua the Enlightened Being reached the Immortal Supremacy realm, he defeated 3 devil supremacies by himself and even killed one of them during the war between the immortal world and the devil world. Of course, it was impossible to verify whether Nan Hua the Enlightened Being was as powerful as recorded in the jade slip. However, he must have been a proud prodigy back then. Every 10,000 years, he can receive 100,000 immortal crystals. That would be 10 million immortal crystals every million years. This treatment of an immortal Emperor realm expert is really good. Shaolin Yu put away the jade slip with a satisfied expression. The cultivation resources in the immortal world were much more abundant than those in the devil world. Ordinary devil emperors in the devil world could hardly take out 10 million devil crystals. However, if immortal emperors in the immortal world were in urgent need of immortal crystals, they could borrow them from a few of their friends. However, Shaolin Yu didn't take into account that even though immortal emperors could receive 10 million immortal crystals every million years, the immortal crystals they would use to cultivate for a million years wasn't a small amount. From the way Qing Pingzi addressed him, Shaolin Yu knew that he was treated like an immortal emperor realm expert in the Nan Hua Immortal Sect. Even though he wasn't an immortal emperor realm expert and didn't have the strength of an immortal emperor, no one would mind having a higher status. The second floor of the pavilion was even smaller. There was only a wooden bed without any decorations and a table and chair by the window. The 4 walls were also bare. No matter how one looked at it, it looked like a cultivation room. Shaolin Yu sat on the wooden bed. Just as he sat cross-legged, he suddenly felt a cooling sensation enter his body, making him feel refreshed. Under the cooling sensation, not only did Shaolin Yu's soul feel refreshed, but his body also felt like it was bathing in the spring breeze. His body quickly adjusted to its peak state. Shaolin Yu spread out his mind. He was surprised to find that the mist around the pavilion was even thicker. It could isolate cultivators' thoughts and vision. There were also obvious restriction ripples. Obviously, as long as he sat on the wooden bed, the hidden arrays and restrictions around the pavilion would automatically activate to ensure that he wouldn't be disturbed. Even though Shaolin Yu didn't go through a huge battle, he still felt a lot of pressure when facing an immortal Emperor realm expert. He gradually entered a cultivation state. In less than 10 minutes, he finished his cultivation with a gloomy expression. As he sat on the wooden bed for longer, the immortal spiritual energy in the cultivation room became denser. However, the chaotic demonic energy in his body had an extremely strong demonic nature, which repelled the immortal spiritual energy. He didn't know what kind of exquisite array had been set up in the pavilion, but it was able to continuously gather immortal spiritual energy and make the immortal spiritual energy automatically drill into the cultivator's body at an extremely fast speed, causing the primal chaos energy in Shaolin Yu's body to gradually become chaotic. How could he cultivate in peace? Helpless, he could only get off the wooden bed, take out a square futon, and cultivate on the floor of the cultivation room. When he left the wooden bed, the restriction ripples around the pavilion disappeared, and the rolling mist gradually dissipated. After a month, Xiaolingyu finished his cultivation and walked out of the pavilion. He followed the path in his memory and walked out of the mountain gate. In the Nanhua Immortal Sect, there weren't many defensive or alert restrictions and arrays. There were also no illusion arrays to confuse people's vision and mind. Xiaolingyu easily reached the gate, walked down the stairs, and flew away. 2 days later, Xiaolingyu arrived at the Nanhua City. The Nanhua City was one of the many big cities owned by the Nanhua Immortal Sect. In the East Imperial Kingdom, its scale was second only to the East Imperial Kingdom. It was also a big city that the Nanhua Immortal Sect focused on. He came to the Nanhua City to sell sand crystals and collect the materials he needed for his cultivation. The city was still bustling with people. Xiaolingyu squeezed into the crowd and walked slowly. Every time he came to a material store, he would enter and sell his sand crystals according to the size of the store. After half a day, Xiaolingyu had sold more than 50 sand crystals. However, he arrived at the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion. The Nanhua Treasure Pavilion was also one of the businesses of the Nanhua Immortal Sect. Moreover, it was the largest material store in the Nanhua City. Xiaolingyu was prepared to sell the remaining tens of sand crystals to the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion. Moreover, he would sell them at a cheaper price as a contribution to the Nanhua Immortal Sect. Daoist friend, how much do you want to sell these sand crystals for? The shopkeeper of the first floor of the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion was a shrewd-looking middle-aged cultivator. He squinted at a sand crystal and asked, 15,000 immortal crystals for one, Xiaolingyu said calmly. If he sold it to other stores, it would be 18,000 immortal crystals. Therefore, 15,000 immortal crystals was a very low price. Although the soul power in these sand crystals is very pure, the amount is too little. 1 or 2 pieces won't be of much use. Moreover, it's practically useless for cultivators above the late stage of the profound demon realm. The price of 15,000 is too high. We can only offer 10,000 immortal crystals each. The shopkeeper on the first floor put down the sand crystals and evaluated. Xiaolingyu frowned slightly and then said generously, I'll do as you say. Xiaolingyu was prepared to sell them to his own people at a cheaper price, so he didn't care how much he would lose. After all, he would get a share of the immortal crystals from the businesses of the Nanhua Immortal Sect. But when Xiaolingyu took out the 50 sand crystals, the shopkeeper on the first floor said, Among these sand crystals, the quality is different. The one you took out just now is considered a high-grade sand crystal and is worth 10,000 immortal crystals. But the rest are not worth it. If we calculate on average, I can only give you 8,000 immortal crystals each. Haha, then I won't sell them. Xiaolingyu put away the sand crystals and walked out of the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion without looking back. He wasn't unwilling to sell them because he felt that he had lost too much. It was just that the shopkeeper was too greedy and disgusted him. However, he was stopped by someone soon after he walked out of the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion. I remember that you're the receptionist of the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion. Why are you blocking my way instead of serving customers in the store? Xiaolingyu said unhappily. I don't want to block your way. Our shopkeeper wants to invite you to the tea house for a chat, the receptionist said awkwardly. I don't know your shopkeeper and I don't know him. What's there to chat about? Xiaolingyu said bluntly. I don't know about that. However, please do me a favor and come to the tea house for a while. The shopkeeper will be back soon, the receptionist said. Chapter 366. Before Xiaolingyu could find the next shop, the shopkeeper of the first floor of the Nanhua Treasure Pagoda came over personally. Daoist, you must have misunderstood. I don't have any bad intentions. I just want to buy your sand crystals privately, the shopkeeper said with a voice transmission. Your price is too low. I'm not selling, Xiaoling Yu replied while walking on her own. Taoist, I'll give you 15,000 sand crystals each. I'll take all of them, the shopkeeper said. That was the price just now. This price is no longer possible, Xiaoling Yu shook her head and replied. Then what price do you want? The shopkeeper asked. 23,000 immortal crystals each, Xiaoling Yu replied indifferently. What? The shopkeeper was stunned. Then, he said with a dark expression, You're too greedy. You don't even look at who you're selling to. I'm greedy? Let's say that I'm greedy. If you don't pay 23,000 immortal crystals, don't even think about buying a single sand crystal, Xiaoling Yu sneered. Taoist, don't forget that this is the Nanhua city. The Nanhua city and the Nanhua treasure pagoda both belong to the Nanhua immortal sect. I advise you to know your place, the shopkeeper said with a threatening tone. Using power to oppress others? You're talking to the wrong person. Xiaoling Yu waved her hand nonchalantly. Then, she turned and walked into a material shop. The middle-aged shopkeeper of Nanhua Treasure Pavilion followed them in and stood beside Xiaoling Yu the whole time. Xiaoling Yu was negotiating with the shopkeeper of this shop, and the shopkeeper just stood there and said something indifferent. They were all shopkeepers of material shops, so they naturally knew each other. Moreover, the Nanhua Treasure Pagoda was the biggest material shop in the city. Moreover, the shopkeeper of the first floor was the shopkeeper of the Nanhua immortal sect. Therefore, not all the shopkeepers in the city knew him. At least all the shopkeepers of the material shops in the city had seen him before. Knowing the identity of the shopkeeper of this shop was naturally wary. Therefore, the deal with Xiaoling Yu couldn't go through. None of the merchants in the South Flower City would be willing to offend the South Flower Immortal Sect for a single business deal. Xiaoling Yu only smiled in response. Then, she left the shop and continued to stroll along the street. As expected, with this middle-aged shopkeeper following him, no matter which material store Xiaoling Yu went to, no one dared to take his sand crystals. Since there were only a few dozen sand crystals left, Xiaoling Yu was not in a hurry. He leisurely strolled around the city. With others following him, it was not good for him to collect any materials. He just walked around aimlessly, taking it as a stroll. It wasn't long before a group of city guards blocked his path, and one of them said, "Great thief Nieyu, let's see where you can escape to this time." This shout came too suddenly, and Xiaoling Yu could not help but be stunned. She scanned her surroundings, trying to see who the city guard was shouting at. What Xiaoling Yu did not expect was that after he shouted, the group of city guards actually surrounded him. Great thief Nieyu has appeared again? He's Great Thief Nieyu. The Great Thief Nieyu who even stole from the city lord's mansion? Great thieves are indeed powerful. How dare they come to the South Flower City? The immortals quickly moved away, but they still surrounded the area curiously. Many of them even pointed at Xiaoling Yu and whispered, "Do they think I'm Great Thief Nieyu?" Xiaoling Yu was a little surprised and frowned. When Xiaoling Yu saw the sneer on the middle-aged shopkeeper's face, he guessed that this guy was in cahoots with the city guards. When he was in the demon realm, Xiaoling Yu was once forced into a big city. Then, he was surrounded by the city guards and brought to the city guard camp. That time, someone else had also colluded with the city guards and almost lost his life. However, the situation was completely different this time. Nieyu, I advise you to be sensible and obediently come with us to the city guard camp. The city lord has always been magnanimous, and might even spare your life. If you resist, don't blame us for being merciless. The city guard who seemed to be the leader shouted at Xiaoling Yu. I'm not Great Thief Nieyu. You've got the wrong person. Although she knew that it was useless to say this, Xiaoling Yu still said it symbolically. We might have mistaken someone else, but you're Great Thief Nieyu. We'll never mistake you. The city guard leader sneered. Then do you have evidence? Xiaoling Yu asked. Although he was surrounded, he looked happy and fearless. Evidence? Come with us to the city guard camp, and you'll see the evidence. The city guard leader said confidently. I'm really curious what evidence you have, so I've decided to go with you, Xiaolingyu said with a smile. As soon as he said this, everyone was surprised. Everyone had guessed many things, but they had not guessed this point. Even the group of city guards was stunned for a moment. Why are you still standing there? Aren't we going to the city guard camp to see the evidence? Xiaolingyu reminded the city guards when he saw that they were not moving after taking a few steps. Yes, good. Your attitude is good. The city lord will definitely be lenient. The city guard leader came back to his senses and signaled for the city guards to continue surrounding Xiaolingyu. Then, he led the way. After walking for an hour, they finally arrived at the city guard camp. Along the way, all the city guards looked as if they were facing a great enemy. However, Xiaolingyu was all smiles, which made the city guard leader feel very uneasy. Could it be that this guy really had a powerful background? Suddenly, the city guard leader felt a little regretful. If this guy had a powerful background, it would be hard for him to back down. After all, this was the Nanhua city, the territory of the Nanhua immortal sect. Nothing would happen. The city guards, who were anxious, brought Xiaolingyu into the city guard camp and locked him in a secret chamber. Not long after, the shopkeeper of the first floor of the Nanhua Treasure Pavilion and a city guard expert at the intermediate stage of the Immortal Lord Realm entered the secret chamber. Hey, shopkeeper, you seem to be very free today. After walking around with me for so long, you still have the interest to accompany me to see the evidence? Xiaolingyu said in a strange tone. I advise you to take out those sand crystals. If you take them out now, I can still give you 300,000 celestial crystals. Otherwise, humph. The middle-aged shopkeeper said with a cold smile. He looked as if he had Xiaolingyu under his control. Didn't you say that I was greedy? We agreed on 500,000 celestial crystals, but after seeing the evidence, the price dropped to 400,000 celestial crystals. Now, it's daylight robbery, Xiaolingyu said with a look of disdain. Sir, you must know that this is the Nanhua city, the middle-aged shopkeeper said with narrowed eyes. Is the Nanhua city your world? Xiaolingyu asked without any change in his expression. It's the Nanhua immortal sect's world. The city guard expert at the intermediate stage of the Immortal Lord Realm answered. Do you mean that you can represent the Nanhua immortal sect? Xiaolingyu continued to ask. Of course. The middle-aged shopkeeper said firmly. Haha, what a joke. Xiaolingyu laughed. Then, his face darkened and he said, You're just a shopkeeper and a city guard at the Immortal Lord Realm. How dare you say that you can represent the Nanhua immortal sect? You even dare to rob in such a blatant manner. Don't you know the rules? After being scolded by Xiaolingyu, the two guards' hearts sank. They were speechless. Sir, are you not going to take out the sand crystals? The middle-aged shopkeeper's face was twisted as he asked viciously. What? Are you really going to rob me? Xiaolingyu tilted his head and asked. Great thief Nieyu has committed a heinous crime. The city lord has ordered us to kill him without mercy. The city guard at the Immortal Lord Realm said confidently. Then, he slapped Xiaolingyu with his palm. The middle-aged shopkeeper responded. A dagger-like Dharma treasure appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it towards Xiaolingyu's heart. Xiaolingyu didn't move. Although the Immortal Lord Realm guard was suspicious, he still slapped Xiaolingyu's head. At the same time, the middle-aged shopkeeper's dagger stabbed into Xiaolingyu's chest. Cruel sneers appeared on the two men's faces. Then, their expressions completely froze. This was because the other party didn't move at all. Moreover, there was a disdainful smile on his face. While the two of them were still in a daze, Xiaolingyu quickly made his move and slapped the two of them hard on the face. The two men's faces were imprinted with 5 fingers. Their heads collided with each other so hard that they felt dizzy. They felt as if there were stars shining in front of them. You're only capable of bullying others with your strength. Xiaolingyu reprimanded them, and walked out of the door. However, just as he reached the door, he was stopped by a cultivator in silver armor. "Sir, you injured people in my city guard camp. Do you still think you can leave safely?" The man said with a gloomy face. "You were also outside the door just now. You should have heard it very clearly. You should know the actual situation better than I do, right?" Xiaoling Yu wasn't too surprised. Even though he sensed that the other party was an immortal emperor expert, he still spoke very calmly. "No matter what, they're still members of the Nanhua immortal sect. You injured them in my city guard camp. If I let you leave, the city guard camp and even the Nanhua immortal sect will lose face. So, please stay." The man stared at the two men with a livid face. However, he was still very stubborn. "They're from the Nanhua immortal sect. Am I not?" Xiaoling Yu said calmly. "You're also a disciple of the Nanhua immortal sect?" The silver-armored cultivator and the other two men were shocked at the same time. However, the middle-aged shopkeeper said, "He's definitely not a disciple of the Nanhua immortal sect. If he was, why would he come to the Nanhua treasure pavilion to sell treasures?" "Shut up!" The silver-armored cultivator scolded the middle-aged shopkeeper. Then, he said to Xiaoling Yu, "It's not a small crime for you to pretend to be a disciple of the Nanhua immortal sect." Xiaoling Yu said with a smile, "If you don't believe me, you can ask Senior Brother Sect Master." Hearing the words, Senior Brother Sect Master, the silver-armored cultivator was even more shocked. Those who could address the sect master as Senior Brother were all immortal emperors. However, he knew all his fellow immortal emperors in the sect, but he didn't know this person. "I just joined. You'll know if you ask," Xiaoling Yu added. The silver-armored cultivator was shocked and suspicious. In the end, he took out his communication immortal bead. "You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.